the Centre Steer Podcast, a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners.
Welcome to the Centre Steer Podcast, podcast number 126 for September of 2023. I'm your host, John Costage. Joining me around the virtual campfire, we've got the full team, Harold, Morgan, and Dixon. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good to be here.
$10 is $10, as they say.
Centre Steer is a monthly podcast for Land Rover enthusiasts, hobbyists, and owners around the world. All of us here at Centre Steer are owners and enthusiasts ourselves, and we thank each of you for listening and engaging with us. Special thanks to our Patreon and Buy Me a Tea subscribers for their support. Patreon supporters, you receive bonus content, including 10 questions. So you need to log into Patreon itself to hear the 10 questions with most of our guests. Our guest last month, Amy Lerner, competed in the Rally Classics Africa. Hopefully you were following along on the web. She and her partner, Sarah Bozerit, I think she's from Belgium. Hopefully I said that correctly. They came in 8th out of 22. So congratulations to Amy and Sarah.
Go Team 20.
I think they ended up being like Team 5 or something, because when I went looking for them out there, Harold, there was no 20. And our guest this month is Tony KIEFFER. Tony is with the Minnesota Land Rover Club. He is active in the Minnesota Four-Wheel Drive Association, and he has been involved in the development of the Iron Range Off-Highway Vehicle Recreation Area. That's a long one and tough to say. It's basically an off-road park. And we're going to hear about development of that recreation area with Tony.
It's actually a pretty kick-ass park that's in northern Minnesota in an abandoned iron mine. And I was there. It was much fun.
And now let's talk about some events that folks have been to and events that are coming up. Morgan, I think you were at the British Invasion.
Yes, I was. I made it down to the British Invasion in Stowe, Vermont. It actually was a pretty nice day. Usually it's way too hot. It was pretty mild.
What's the date?
It's a 3-day event. So it's on the Friday, which was the 15th of September, in the evening, do a block party in downtown Stowe, which is a nice, cute little village. And then on the Saturday, they have the all-day car show, British car show, with judging and all sorts of competitions. And then on the Sunday, they have a little bit of the car show for part of the day. And then they also have a drive event that British vehicle owners can go on. Nice little scenic drive. And we have the Smuggler's Notch, which is a very small notch weaving through boulder fields between Mount Mansfield and one other mountain, which has the Stowe ski mountain on it. That's just an awesome drive. Lots of events, not only for visitors, people viewing the vehicles at the event, but also for the owners of the vehicles, so they can really get out and enjoy them. And this year, because it started on 15th, 16th, and ended on the 17th, Saturday the 16th was actually the day that Hurricane Lee was supposed to make landfall. I guess at that point it was Tropical Storm Lee making landfall in Maine. So we were a little concerned that it would be a rainy day. But fortunately, the rain held off and it got quite nice in the afternoon, but never overly hot.
How many rovers did show it up?
There were between 30 and 40. I didn't go through all my photos and count the exact number, but it was definitely a very large showing. And this year, because it was the 75th, they actually made it Jaguar Land Rover the featured mark again. So that was nice.
Wait. It was Jaguar and Land Rover was the mark, even though it was Land Rover 75th?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is just because they usually pair those two together.
Gotcha.
And they have usually a lot more Jags than Land Rovers.
Yeah, that seems to be typical even here.
Jaguar is coming up on 100 years now.
Oh, for sure.
But when it comes time for Jaguars 100, will they then also invite Land Rovers?
I certainly hope so.
They should. They should about being fair play and all that.
That's right. That's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
I will say they still always park the Land Rovers off to the side of the field.
Because they can park anywhere.
They can park anywhere. And truthfully, let's just say that a British car event if you parked the Land Rovers like in the front row, you wouldn't really be able to see most of the British vehicles that would be there because they would just all be hidden behind the taller Land Rovers.
Yeah, but why would you need to?
Unless you're a Jag fan.
True. Yes.
How would you compare the British Invasion to the Vintage Grand Prix, since I know you've been to both, and that just gives me a reference?
It's a very similar showing in terms of number of vehicles, I would say. The one thing that's the very obvious thing that's different is the racing. And the setting is obviously quite different as well, not being in the nice park in the middle of Pittsburgh. You're not quite in the middle of nowhere, but you're just like in a small town.
And the distinct lack of Germans, Italians, and pesky Japanese cars.
And domestics.
Yes. So that was the other part that I was going to say is that the showing is almost the same number, but yeah, you just don't get any of the other international.
It is the British Invasion, so it's in the title.
Yes. One would expect
exactly.
Yeah. Any interesting Rovers show up?
Absolutely. I actually got an interview with one of my favorites, the 1979 St. John's ambulance that Hayden Pearson brought. He was actually not far from us at Greek Peak for the Diamond Jubilee in the camping area. Very cool Land Rover. He's got a whole bunch of others, and you'll hear more about that in a few minutes in an interview that I recorded on the field with him. So that was really nice to catch up with him. Had a lot of other people that I really wanted to interview, but my back was out. So I got to the point where I couldn't stand anymore. So doing interviews wasn't great, but there were so many interesting vehicles there and lots of the D2s and some of the newer Range Rovers. One of the very interesting vehicles of the newer Range Rovers was a long wheelbase 2020 Range Rover that was over from Sarasota Springs, New York. Mary Grace had that, and it was one that she had through her work been saving up, searching for a nice Range Rover to pick up, bought this through Carvana, and then after the fact discovered some of the really interesting things about it that I wish I had gotten a recording of her. We got some photos that we'll probably put on the website. But basically, it's a fascinating bright blue color, and it turned out to be the athletic model. So in addition to being the long wheelbase, there are some changes in the positioning of the seats and such for taller athletes. So just very fascinating that she was able to get this really nice Range Rover that was quite unique and was a surprise to her what she actually ended up getting, especially because with Carvana, they tend to do a lot of prep and testing of vehicles, but they don't actually care about the price. Like whatever price they set, that's the price. There's no haggling. They don't necessarily know the specifics of these vehicles.
That was see them get a truck that big into their vending machines.
I know. I should have asked her whether she was able to buy it from one of the vending machines or not. Yeah, there were a couple of high cap Defenders there, the high capacity pickups. One has been there a couple of years and has a nice camper on the back, a standard pickup truck camper, which just don't get to see enough of those around. And it's always funny seeing how they had to shim it up a foot to fit in the back of the Defender and such. The guy who runs the Vermont Rovers Club down in southern Vermont, he was there with his 130 high cap, which was cool. Standard dual cab model of that. And there were a bunch of older series vehicles, some pretty nice restorations, and a bunch that were just clearly get out on the trail and have a lot of fun, which is very nice to see because most vehicles at the show are pretty immaculate. And of course, Jim Macri of High Meadow Rovers was there with his really immaculate restorations, which he actually did not enter this year. I think he's got the center steer reproduction as well. I think he was trying to not steal the thunder from everybody else.
Give some people a chance.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so it was just nice to check in with everybody that I haven't seen in a few years due to lockdowns and stuff like that. And it was just a large showing this year of the Land Rovers. And British Invasion had Land Rover, Jaguar as the featured marks not that long ago. It might have even been 2018. I can't remember exactly, but it was so nice to see it flip back.
How many British marks are there still active that you can, that you may want to have active unless you want to go back in time?
They still feature most of the marks that people are collecting.
No, I understand. Making a point. It's tough to.
Yes, in terms of new marks. Yeah.
So the British Invasion takes place at Stowe at the same time as another event, Dixon, the OVLR birthday party.
Before I get to that one, since our last podcast, there's also was the main Misfits and Rover Bits rally, the end of August. It's a very small, classic Land Rover gathering and so on that takes place in Green, Maine. You can camp out and so on there, and there's lots of trails, rock ledges, mud ruts, green laning, and so on. That's something that our listeners should think about for next year.
Not in the same place as the Winter Romp.
No, it's different location. And now to continue on with, again, Stowe, which is about a 500 car event, there was also the British Car Day in Bronte Creek, Toronto. It's the largest British car show in North America on a single day. It's over 1,000 cars.
Wow.
And there were apparently quite a few Land Rovers there, but I haven't really heard about it because I actually went to the 40th OVLR birthday party, which took place on Black Donald Lake in the Calabogie Highlands west of Ottawa. About 80 people showed up, quite a few Land Rovers and such. It's a very enjoyable event. New location.
Not Silver Lake.
Not Silver Lake. No, this is about 20 miles to the north in the Highlands on another lake. Think hydro cuts that go on for hundreds of miles, and they've got trails on them and through the woods around there, and we can go and drive down these. It was dry. The birthday party is usually in June, but it was in September this year because they moved it later because of the Greek Peak event in the middle of June. The driving was actually very technical. A lot of ups and downs and raw exposed bedrock and so on. Not very much water, but it was a very enjoyable event.
How many different kinds of trucks showed up? Did you get new Defenders and old trucks?
There was quite a variety, though. The Defenders are the majority at this point in time. There's a few series there, not as many as I expected. Couple of the new vehicles. The issue was, again, you had Stowe, Bronte Creek, and the birthday party all happening on the same weekend. People get into habits. Normally, I would go down to Stowe, and I had a choice of not only did you have 3 events you could go to, but there was also an air show across the river in Gatineau with vintage aircraft and so on. For a 4th distraction, I know at least 2 people that would have gone to the birthday party went to the air show.
Right.
So
that'll happen.
That's what happened this time around.
Will the birthday party return to its Father's Day timing next year?
I am not sure at this point in time. The advantage of the fall is that there were absolutely no bugs. But the water quotient, which actually a lot of people enjoy, is also way down because you've had all summer for it to drain off.
And it has been fun catching up with you at British Invasion, and this year I was like, oh, that's not going to happen.
Put it this way, if they're thinking of going and keeping it in September, as long as it doesn't conflict with Stowe or Bronte, would be advantageous for a lot of people, because a lot of the people from southwestern Ontario are going to go to Bronte Creek because they've been going to it for the past 30, 40 years. Stowe's been going on since the late 80s. People are habitual.
And you said this is an anniversary year for the birthday party?
This was the 40th, though effectively the club goes back to 74 because of the Association of Land Rover Owners of Canada. But the birthday party started in 1984. It's the longest running Land Rover event in North America.
Excellent. Excellent. So what's coming up on the Land Rover calendar in North America?
In terms of the ANARC clubs first, there's the Mid-Atlantic Rally put on by the Virginia Club. It's the weekend of October 5th to 8th.
Which is sold out, by the way.
It's sold out in 5 hours.
Yeah.
When they opened up registration in early August. There's that one.
And I think the tickets they put on sale in mid-September also sold out quickly.
Yeah. Oh, very quickly. For winter rompers, there's going to be a work weekend on October 20th to 22nd to go and help work on the trails and everything else there. That's a free event that you can go to and have some enjoyment and so on with. That's an easy one to go and participate with.
No ice.
No ice. And those trails are very different in the summer, fall than when you see them when they're all icy and white. It's quite spectacularly different. The driving them and so on is very different from what you expect. It's always worth showing up if you can to one of the work weekends. The Rovers Club on October 20 to 22nd has got their fall Robinsonia trials. It's RTV trials and things like that they've been running for about the past 20 years.
And that's out of Philadelphia, correct?
It's McMullen Mountain, Pennsylvania. You would know exactly where that is far better than I am from.
All I can tell you is that it's not in Western Pennsylvania, so therefore it is in Eastern Pennsylvania.
Yes. And then finally, we have the 19th annual Uhari Road Expedition put on by the Old North State Land Rover Society on November 3rd to 5th down in the Uhari National Forest in central North Carolina. Lots of information with that on on Facebook and so on. For information on all of these events, go to the ANARC Club calendar at anarc.club on the internet. There's links and such for all of these events there to quickly find out more about them if you're interested in any of them. In terms of non-ANARC events coming up, there's the Cape Cod series, a rally that's happening on October 1st as this podcast lands in your ears.
Perhaps you're even listening whilst driving there.
Vineyardseries.com is where to find that. October 2nd to 6th, the Solihull Society is having their national rally in Moab, Utah. Information on that's on their website or in Facebook. There is another non-club associated rally called the Pilgrimage on October 5th to 8th in South Royalton, Vermont. And finally, October 13th, 15th is the Hill Country Rover Rally, a nonprofit event put together by Land Rover enthusiasts in South and Central Texas. Again, Facebook or hillcountryrally.com. And that would be all of the items for the month of October that I've run across so far.
Thanks for giving us the event update, especially here in North America. Before we get to the news, let's have that field report from the British invasion at Stowe, where Morgan talks with Hayden Pearson. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks very much, Morgan, for talking to Hayden Pearson and giving us that field report. Appreciate it.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. I'm really glad that I bumped into him again.
All right, now, time for the news. Jaguar Land Rover jobs. There are jobs available working for JLR in the UK, which I realize most of our listeners are probably here in North America. But hey, you never know. You might want to work for JLR, and there's some jobs out there. I'm just going to call out a couple just because I found it interesting. Birmingham Live says here, hundreds of jobs are up for grabs at JLR, and you can apply right now. Job site Indeed is showing nearly 400 jobs are available at the manufacturer, with a good portion of those in their base across the West Midlands, including Solihull. And a couple just to point out, there's a parts assistant apprentice, and there's deputy venue manager. Not even sure what a venue manager is. There's a Range Rover studio venue manager. There's a maintenance technician, maintenance group leader, dimensional VRT technician, a battery launch manager, a lead product specialist, integrated production system technology lead. Sounds like almost like an IT job.
It's also interesting to see what's available because it also gives an indication of where companies are going in terms of what they're hiring.
Yep, absolutely. That's why I think that VRT thing probably has to do, I'm guessing, with the creation of vehicles using the computer graphics.
I hope it's for creating vehicles and not for virtual reality technologies while driving the vehicle.
Yes. Now, at least one of those listings was a hybrid on-site and remote. So you might even find, if you go through all the listings, you might find some that are full remote, and you could work from here in the US.
You might have a greater chance of working remote if you're in IT because of this next story. TCS wins $1 billion contract with JLR. Tata Consultancy Services, that's TCS, has secured a significant contract with JLR, a subsidiary of Tata Motors, valued at £800 million, $1 billion, over the next 5 years. Under this agreement, TCS will play a crucial role in helping JLR revamp its digital services, simplifying and managing these services while constructing a modern, future-ready technology architecture aligned with JLR's reimagined strategy. TS's scope of services includes application development and maintenance, enterprise infrastructure management, cloud migration, cybersecurity, and data services. The partnership is expected to usher in a more streamlined, flexible, scalable operational model for JLR, enabling cost savings over the next half decade. There you go. If you're in IT, you have a greater chance.
Tata giving Tata business.
Pretty much. Yes, I wonder how they had a little leg up to secure that contract.
And also, I think that TCS is probably one of the Indian technology outsourcing companies, guessing by Tata themselves. It's interesting that they're able to outsource to India while still maintaining it within the parent company.
True. But TCS also employs people in this country.
Indeed.
So it's not strictly an Indian outsourcing company. So one could be an American and work for Tata.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're based in India, but yeah, they have worldwide operations.
I want to know if you get an employee discount on a new Defender.
You do. I do know someone who works for TCS, and they said they can get a discount of some sort. They're based here in the U.S. They work for TCS, and apparently they can get some sort of discount on JLR vehicles.
Very cool.
Next up, JLR announces a 5-year warranty across all Range Rover, Defender, and Discovery models. A 5-year manufacturer warranty on all new Range Rover, Defender, Discovery models will come into effect on September 1st of this year, 2023. The initiative will give clients added assurance and peace of mind when choosing a vehicle from JLR. The new warranty applies to all models throughout Europe and extends the existing 3-year warranty to provide protection for up to 5 years or 150,000 kilometers, whichever comes first. The article goes on to say it's normally like 3 years. So they've extended it basically to the 5 years.
They're becoming more competitive, but the devil's going to be in the details, because at least here in Canada, when you read the details, your corrosion warranty doesn't protect you from corrosion caused by, let's see, road salt. If you live in deepest, darkest New England or New York State or Ontario, Quebec, you do see a slight little bit of road salt in the winter months, or for half the year.
Like you need to outfit your truck with a plow just to push the salt out of the way.
That's so true.
Interestingly, this warranty, while it applies in Europe, it does not extend to Britain. It's only for Europe proper.
England decided to leave Europe.
As a tangent, it was interesting. I have a magazine here. It's either Car and Driver or Road and Track or something, where the main article is discussing the introduction of the Buick V8, which became the Rover V8. But that's not what's the most interesting thing in the magazine. What's actually interesting is the editorial, which is about the introduction of a 90-day warranty for going from 30, and how they were saying that this was going to be the end of the auto industry. And here we are with JLR going from 3 to 5 years.
I don't know. A 90-day warranty on that Rover V8 could almost break the company.
It's not a Freelander.
All right, let's move on. Although that was not a tangent, that was actually a really good bit of information there, Dixon. It's always interesting to look back in the past of how things were. I always like to remind people that in the mid-'60s, you could get a Cadillac for $5,000.
You could get a house for $5,000 too, though.
All right, let's move on. Land Rover is developing new parts for old Defenders. After introducing the limited and pricey Classic Defender V8 2 years ago, Land Rover Classic is back with authentic and approved parts and accessories for the enduring nameplate. The company aims to keep these timeless vehicles on the road longer by offering a range of new and upcoming parts Parts, presented at the Goodwood Revival, was the Expedition Camper, a classic Defender with camping-ready accessories. Land Rover Classic has partnered with leading accessory manufacturers to ensure these parts meet or exceed automakers' stringent quality standards. And you can get this, we'll have a link, of course, to the story and to the website, which is, it's a Land Rover Classic website, which will take you to JLR, which is a little confusing in this article. They're saying developing new parts for old Defenders when it seems more like accessories.
Which is interesting because it certainly shows the utility of the original Defenders and all the things you could bolt onto them. The kind of dearth of availability, the same for the new Defender. You wonder if there's a message for Jerry there. Are they missing the old Defender already?
This almost seems one part of the company doing something and another part of the company doing something else, because they keep talking about we're moving upscale, and we've made it a clear point of saying we don't recognize the 75-year heritage, and yet we're still going to have genuine parts available.
Yeah, but this was the Classic Works, which is dedicated to the old ones and restoring them. So it's just adding an additional product line into their offering. Yeah. And basically, they're just trying to horn in on what everybody else has been making for them for years. They figure, look at all this aftermarket stuff that exists. We should be getting a piece of that pie.
Oh, it's great that they're getting into this.
Yeah.
It says lots of good things about the company and what could happen.
I wonder if the TCS employee discount applies to those.
It is important to note that all prices are in pounds, and the site says that they will ship worldwide using DHL. It depends on where you're here in America. You could, I guess, you could buy some of these parts and have them shipped here to the U.S. Global DHL express delivery within 3 to 5 working days. And these just happened to pull something up random. This is a Land Rover Defender Works Trophy Gold Pack, 110-inch wheelbase right-hand drive without air conditioning. Includes side steps, some screws, steel wheel primer, headlamp, LEDs, wheel nuts, and the price of the side step runners, which are currently out of stock, is £879. 732 pounds, excluding VAT. So there's an example for you. You have another option of getting items from Land Rover itself. All right, let's move on to a conversation with Anthony Peat, who's the chief exterior designer for JLR. The Land Rover Velar has received a facelift and was just launched in India. At the launch event, this magazine caught up with Anthony Peat, chief exterior designer JLR, who is also responsible for life cycle updates like the one Velar has just received. In this conversation, he shares his thoughts on intricacies of automotive design, the balance between tradition and innovation, and the evolving landscape of luxury in the automotive industry. I'm not going to read all the questions and answers. If you want to go check out the whole article, of course, we'll have a link in the show notes, but I think 2 or 3 questions I'm going to pull out and we can talk about those. So the question is, the Velar was already a good looking car and a lot of updates are building on that already great design. How do you improve something already great? he responds, this is the problem with mid-cycle refreshes. Some people think they are limited and therefore it is easy because they're limited, but they are not. They're quite difficult because certain things you're going to touch and change. You have to enhance the product. So yes, the Velar was a very difficult job because it is such a good starting point, but we used the opportunity to align the new Velar with a Range Rover product that is now starting to develop. So with a Range Rover flagship, bringing the Velar to align with that in terms of front face and appearance and technology. So we measured steps. And then the next question was, what are you doing differently that is allowing you to deliver such a high level on the design front? His response was, Range Rover, we are very thoughtful about what we do. It is very much a case of not what you do, but what you leave out. It sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes it's easier to do more and harder to do less. So that's always the rationale behind the Range Rover brand. Final question I was going to pull out here, and there's about 10 questions in total they talked to him about. This one here is, how do you interpret your legacy and continue it into the modern era? And his response was, legacy is a very important thing. We've built up a lot of history and we are not afraid to reference that, but we're not shackled by it. Especially with our future-looking brands, we're always trying to take the brand on. Heritage is something we are very proud of, but it's never held us back. The brand sensibilities that created the old products, they're still part of what the new products are. For instance, having high technology in the vehicles and being at the forefront of vehicle technologies and driving dynamics are as true now as it was 50 years ago. So these things are effectively just growing and evolving with the brands. As I said, there's a number of additional questions. You're welcome to go check those out, but I thought those were the three that kind of stood out to me. Reinforcing, I think, what Jerry has been saying for a while. We're moving on.
The difference is this guy acknowledged that heritage actually is somewhat important, as opposed to Jerry, who just said that doesn't matter.
Pretty much, yeah.
He didn't design it. It's irrelevant.
Let's move on to, these are the 10 of the slowest selling used cars on the market. And this is in the U.S. Not going to read all 10, but it's the two that stand out, of course, are related to our beloved Land Rover. Number 4 is the Discovery Sport. And this is the slowest selling used cars on the market, and it's 73.6 days on average remaining on the market, whereas the Tesla Model S is the slowest selling. It has 88 days, and the Buick Enclave is number 10 at 64 days, and the Discovery Sport is 73 days, and the Range Rover Flagship, which we just heard it called by Anthony Peat, is at 68.4 days. So those are both in the middle of slowest selling used cars in the U.S. market.
The Range Rover is slow because it's expensive. And the Discovery is slow because nobody wants them new either.
Yeah, when you have a used vehicle that's $75,000, that's going to be fairly slow to sell.
Especially percentage-wise, getting the new one isn't going to be that much more. If you're in for $75K, going for 100 or whatever isn't that difficult.
Yeah. And to Harold, your point about the new Discovery Sport not selling new, you are correct. The 5 slowest selling new cars on the market. The second is the Discovery Sport with 119 days average days on the market. Interestingly, number 1, the Jeep Cherokee, 128 days average on the market. And next up is the most stolen vehicles in America, and 2 Land Rovers made the list. Number 10 is the Range Rover Sport, and number 12 is the Range Rover Flagship, the full-size Range Rover.
Maybe that's why the Range Rover Sport isn't selling, because they're so easy to steal.
Yeah, you might have something there.
Which is it? Chicago is suing one of the manufacturers or a couple of the manufacturers for not fixing problems with the locking systems and so on.
I think that's Kia, because they had an easy to defeat locking mechanism. Yes.
It's good on Chicago's part, because maybe these companies will start to do anything. Up here, it's the Lexus and Toyotas that they are into the cars in under 2 minutes and away. And if I was the police, I would be annoyed too, because this has been going on for years.
And yet the stuff that I think is easy to steal is not on the list, the Series 2s and the early Defenders.
There's not a demand for them.
But they're easy to steal.
They don't go fast.
Oh.
Come on.
Some of them, the keys are in the ignition all the time.
They go. Some of them don't even have key locks. They just have toggle switches, but they go off the lot fast.
They're not on lots. Let's face it. They're not on lots. They're in someone's driveway or home. But
okay, but they leave there fast, or they can leave.
Here they vanish. When they target them, they vanish. They're straight down the highway to Montreal, into containers, and off to Africa.
Yep, same thing here in the U.S. A lot of these are shipped overseas, stripped of their parts. Those are the newer ones.
Now, can we just have somebody do a remake of the Fast and the Furious with them only stealing old Land Rovers?
Ooh. Fast and Furious.
It wouldn't be fast.
It would be the slow and the impertinent.
Yes.
I think that would be the 166th edition of Fast and Furious, the Yui movie. That one, it's all Land Rovers all the time, and the movie goes at about 5 miles an hour.
If you thought 2001 A Space Odyssey had a slow pace to it, just wait.
But the neat thing is the police don't need fast cars to pursue them. They can do it on foot.
All right, let's move on to electric Jaguar Successor will reportedly eschew rear window and Leaper logo. So the company has already confirmed a 3-vehicle lineup, which will be headlined by a 4-door GT that will arrive in 2025 and have up to 430 miles, that's 700 kilometers of range. The other 2 models were believed to be crossovers, but an insider has told Autocar that one of them is actually an imposing limousine conceived in the mold of the XJ. The model will reportedly look nothing like an XJ, as it will adopt a radically minimalist design, designed with a low-slung silhouette defined by a sharp surfacing and generous proportions. The car is also said to have a long hood, slender lighting units, and a non-functional grille-style structure that will come to be known as the new face of Jaguar. Other reported highlights included 22-inch wheels and a floating roof thanks to blacked-out pillars. Much to the chagrin of traditionalists and common sense, the model is also said to eschew a rear window, as Jaguar will reportedly rely on a digital rearview mirror like the Polestar 4. And the bad news doesn't end there, as the Leaper emblem will reportedly be replaced by Jaguar lettering. That would be the biggest change since the Leaper hood ornament was phased out nearly 2 decades ago.
Right. The XJ hasn't had a Leaper, well, since the mid-90s. It had the Growler, but not the Leaper, yeah.
Yeah, I happened to visit one of the JLR dealerships here in Pittsburgh a week or 2 ago. I had to deliver something, and I just happened to be talking to their marketing guy, and he said they had to take off the Jaguar symbol off the dealership, and he said, yep, we're going to be putting up just the word Jaguar, but they haven't got any details on what that is yet. But that has happened. They actually did take down the Jaguar. I guess it would have been what did they use? I guess they used the Growler on the...
They used the Leaper.
Oh, they used the Leaper, yeah.
Yeah.
So they had taken down the Leaper, and they're going to be putting up a Jaguar.
And at least it's still Jaguar and not JLR or just J.
There you go, just J.
Jag, can we just make it Jag? That's probably not upscale enough. And next, this is from Motor Biscuit, and 2 areas where Range Rover owners want to see improved, and probably not surprised by this. According to J.D. Power's appeal study, the Range Rover excelled in most categories, particularly in the top 5 categories of exterior styling, interior design, powertrain, feeling of safety, and driving feel. More surprisingly, the Range Rover ranked highest amongst all 5 large premium SUV models. Despite these impressive ratings, Range Rover owners did have 2 major complaints about their vehicles, both of which landed in the bottom 5 ranked categories. The 2 areas drivers felt most dissatisfied were the infotainment system and fuel economy. So on the infotainment system specifically regarding sound quality, the base Meridian audio system provided excellent fidelity, separation, and overall sound clarity, whether you're listening to music or streaming. However, Range Rover drivers may find it challenging to access volume and tuning controls, as there are no easy-to-use dash-mounted rotary knobs. Additionally, though there are radio power on and off and volume adjust knobs on the front console and steering wheel mounted buttons, this may be inconvenient to some. And then on the fuel economy side, Range Rover offers an engine lineup with a good power and torque. The better fuel economy ratings are not particularly impressive compared to other luxury SUVs, but it's important to note that luxury vehicles like the Range Rover are designed to offer a luxurious experience with smooth, powerful performance rather than efficiency. That means a trade-off from fuel economy perspective is to be expected. And if you're paying $100,000 for a new Range Rover, you're probably not worried about the cost of petrol.
I wouldn't think, but apparently they are. According to this study, they say they are concerned about the fuel mileage.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the people go and complain about the fuel economy when it's right up in front. When before you buy the vehicle, it's getting 17.1 miles per gallon. And then you complain about it afterwards.
They're getting a survey from JD Power, and it's a list of things that you like and don't like. So they're ticking the boxes. It's not to be unexpected. It's not like they went out and they're knocking on the door of the dealership saying, I need better gas mileage. They get some email survey, and it's just check boxes or you write in.
Yeah, and even the competition in terms of the similar vehicles, they're not getting any better gas mileage. So
1 or 2, maybe,
these are
at best.
Yeah, maybe. It's also possible that Range Rovers are more likely to be popular amongst people who want a more efficient vehicle. It's not going to happen with that size vehicle.
It might also be an appearance thing also, where you're part of a set of group of people who want to They maybe have kids, or you yourself want to have a more efficient vehicle. The kids are probably saying, why do you have this large vehicle? It should be more efficient. There's that perception issue also. Hey, you're spending $100,000 and it's only getting 17 miles of the gallon when you could spend a quarter of that and get 30 miles of the gallon. All right, let's talk about some competition for Land Rover over in Europe. The Jeep Recon is an electric off-roader targeting Land Rover Defender's territory. And as part of its strategic move to rejuvenate its presence in Europe, Jeep has unveiled its new electric off-roader, the Recon, set to challenge the Defender. Slated for a 2025 launch, the Recon boasts a commendable near 600 brake horsepower and an estimated driving range of approximately 373 miles. The vehicle is poised to be an electric counterpart to the iconic Wrangler. The Recon will share foundational elements with the Wagoneer S, another anticipated release for 2025. Together with a recently introduced compact Avenger, a Jeep Avenger, these additions will expand Jeep's European offerings to 7 diverse models by mid-decade. They're making a push into Europe.
And that is into Europe, again, not into the UK, correct?
That's unclear whether it includes Britain or not. Next is confirmed mini Mercedes G-Class coming to battle the Defender 90. Mercedes-Benz CEO has confirmed a little G-Class will be on its way in a few years for fans of the iconic SUV. Speaking to CNBC, the 2023 Munich Motor Show, the CEO said, "We have something in store for G fans around the world. There will be a little G, kind of the daughter or son of the big G." It's supposed to be about the size of a Defender 90.
I'm surprised. Is it battling the Defender 90? Is it really? It looks more like it's going to battle the old Defender 90, or it's going to battle the Ineos. But it certainly, I don't think, would be battling the new Defender 90.
Kind of looks like it wants to battle the Jimny.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is it really looks a lot more like a really expensive Jimny.
I don't think this picture that they show here, I think it's just a rendering of what possibly could be. I think it's just more of a teaser, see what happens. Clearly, they wouldn't be doing it unless there's money to be made. Mercedes doesn't just do things without having some money to be made.
Oh, there's money to be made in the Jimneys.
Fair.
Everywhere but in the U.S.
Not here in the U.S., but...
Speaking of the U.S., Grenadiers are on the way. Petrochemical giant Enos begins production of the Grenadier for the U.S. market at its plant in Hambach, France. The Land Rover Defender-style SUV, powered by BMW engines, has faced a number of delays in its journey, but deliveries already began in a number of countries earlier this year. The Grenadier will start at $73,000 in the U.S., placing it in competition with a Defender, but not quite the G-Class Mercedes. I know I've seen people talking about the coming Grenadier here in the U.S. Some seem to be very interested. Curious to see folks that actually pull the trigger.
I know there's a number of people because I've seen some chatter online about I'm reservation number XX. And I know a number of people have paid their deposit and they're just wondering when and if the price is going to get marked up since they put their deposit on it or just what's going to happen. There's still a lot of uncertainty.
And I think they're still working on what the dealership network is going to be here in the U.S. That's unclear.
Right.
Next, your new car's options now come with a monthly fee. We've talked about this before, but now we got some kind of concrete info. Automakers are embracing a new business model that requires paid subscriptions to unlock everything from entertainment options to enhanced navigation and hands-free driving. Car buyers are open to subscription add-ons, so this article says, if they get to try services first, according to a recent S&P Global Mobility survey. It's difficult for buyers to fork over thousands of dollars at the time of purchase for technology features they're not sure they'll use, the survey found. 82% of respondents who had experienced a free trial or an existing connected service plan said they would definitely or probably pay for it on a future car. However, respondents said they don't want a subscription for features like heated steering wheel or seats, a lesson BMW famously learned. So nothing here about Land Rover itself, but it's important to note that the bigger automakers, Ford, General Motors, I suspect Stellantis, are looking at these things, and that could eventually trickle down to Land Rover.
GM is looking at or predicting that they're going to be raking in somewhere between $20 and $25 billion per year by the end of this decade. And Ford says it's worth hundreds of millions to them today. I'm not sure where, but they're looking at that going up by 10 times. So they're going to be into the multi-billions too. So this is certainly something that's coming. How well it's accepted by the public is going to be very interesting.
Sort of the new automotive manufacturer pusher scheme, though, especially with the offering to give like a 30-day trial or something like that with a feature. I mean, that's
just wait till American dealerships get their hands on this. We're like, oh, you also want the heated seats. You want the seat belts that automatically retract in a crash. Oh, and this is subscription. We'll make it a little discount for you.
It's like the paint sealants back in the 80s. It's going to be the whole deal of bundling of subscriptions.
It's terrible. Absolutely terrible. I see why they're thinking about it and doing it, but here in America, it's going to be horrible.
As long as they don't make like heat and windshield wipers and things like that as a subscription.
They probably couldn't because of our safety and emission regulations. I suspect that would require that to be part of the vehicle.
You couldn't do anything that's going to affect the safety requirements for vehicles and so on. But they're going to have to go do some pretty good cybersecurity on these systems because people are just going to go and unlock it. Look at the chap that I saw somewhere on Facebook, I think it was. This person was going to be driving across part of the United States, and if you wanted to unlock features in your JLR product, he was able to do it. The demand for something like that coming out of Eastern Europe is going to make your Ford F-150 subscriptions just turn everything on. And then how does that affect warranties and so on? It'll be quite interesting to see how this turns out.
And they have another thing they need to address also, and that is, I don't know if you saw this here it was a study that was done, or a report, done here in the U.S. about privacy concerns when it comes to cars and how much information, all this that the car companies are collecting, and even
they scored dead last on that one.
All the car companies did. Of course, JLR, of course, too small to actually be on that list. I don't think that they realize is going to, I think, become important, and that will affect also this. Are you going to want to buy a new car if it's tracking everything you do? And I understand, yes, you have a cell phone, you usually take it with you when you're traveling, but that is actually a more privacy conscious, even the Google phones, than automakers are at the moment. So that's something that I think is going to be another coming hurdle for automakers. They need to get their hands around the privacy and information that they're collecting.
Not to mention these extra features, I think, just create new vectors for hacking your way into the vehicle.
And JLR has already, at least in the UK, started their subscription plans. So they're really trying to do the same thing that has happened with cell phones, especially once the smartphones were introduced here in the US, where you get your subscription to your phone and all the features are just add-on things that you can subscribe to, and then you get on the plan to get the new model every 3 years. They're just all going for that.
It's all about the subscription model because that is a constant stream of income, and that's all they see. Constant stream of income. It's the changing nature of the marketplace.
I'm waiting for them to have different levels of subscription based on how many miles you want to drive each month.
And that may be something where that may save some people some money too. Where
just like the data packages.
Yeah, where you're only those who are in like Pennsylvania. Do we need to have our heated seats available for us in more than maybe 4 months out of the year? So it might make sense to only pay for it so you can use it in the 4 months out of the year that you might actually need it. There's some possibilities there where it could help people, or maybe a little cheaper to own and operate. I think overall, though, it's going to be a crap show for a while till that all gets sorted out.
I just don't foresee any of this being ways to save money for the consumer. I think it's all about making more money for the car maker.
Bingo.
I think they'll sell it as, instead of selling you a car for an extra $5,000 with all of these features, we will turn those features off. Your car will be $5,000 less. And then if you want all these features, it'll probably end up costing like $10,000. But
yeah, except it won't be $5,000 less. It'll be the same price. Plus, then you can subscribe to these things.
But again, I think this is how they're going to sell it. They're going to say that, look, the price of the car is not going to go up from what it is maybe now at this X price. You get these things. If you want these extras, it's easy for us to turn them on and off as you need them.
And then also there's the side of it. Just like that comment, they're like, oh, it'll be easy to turn on and off. Have you ever tried to cancel like, cable service or something?
That's another thing they'll have to address, is making that easy, and you've got to make it frictionless. Otherwise, there'll be a major problem, and people hear about it. There's a lot of things they need to work out, admittedly, and that's why you're seeing these studies out, and you're seeing these things tried, and them talking about General Motors giving people advance notice. We're getting rid of having CarPlay and Google Play, whatever the car version is called, built into the car. They're giving this advance notice so you can prep them and prepare for them, not just spring it on people when they go in to buy the car.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. What happens what happened with cell phones, where parents would get a nice fancy phone, hand it over to their kids. Their kids went on the App Store and started downloading free games, but spending lots of money and the add-on points for their games. What happens when their kids get in the car and subscribe to everything?
It's they'll probably be like you have with a computer now. You have a primary account. You'll probably have to have a special password. Turn it on, turn it off. Your car can't be.
That actually opens an opportunity if you want to make horsepower a subscription. You could have parental controls and only give your kids access to 60 horsepower or something.
Or cut the speed, or it can only go 60 miles an hour.
The performance limit with parental controls, and then when you get back in using your own key fob, you get all 600 horsepower or whatever.
Or you go in and you plug in your own code.
Yeah.
Yep. Key fobs will go away.
Whatever. You get what I'm saying, though. Once it identifies the correct person, it gives you more.
Yeah, you just pocket dad's phone when you get in the car and you've got sport mode enabled.
Or dad says, hey, run to the car. I forgot my wallet. Can you go get it? What's your code, dad, to get in? And it turns out it's the same code as he uses to purchase the subscription services. All right, let's move on. The 2023 Range Rover review. This is from The Drive. If you're considering buying one, this may be something for you to look at. It's a link to the article. Go out and check it out yourself. I'm not going to read you the article, but you might want to check it out. Again, if you're looking to buy. A lot of the things we mentioned in the previous article about things that Range Rover owners were looking for improvements, it's the same thing this article mentions about the infotainment system and the fuel economy. Other than that, they really do like the vehicle. They thought it was a lovely vehicle.
And I think one of the things that is a shame about the infotainment system in the Range Rovers that needs improvement is the audio controls. For a vehicle that was like the darling of American hip hop in the 90s and the aughts, like you would think they would have really good sound systems.
And carpool karaoke takes place inside a Range Rover, so you'd want to have a good audio system. It was interesting. The reviewer of this article did mention that they thought the new Defender's audio system was more responsive than the new Range Rover's audio system. So it seems like they may have maybe gone a little backwards. It's probably just a software change, would be my guess, maybe for the haptic system or for the touch sensitivity. But again, something they're going to have to work on and continue to work on. And we talked about this, I think, a couple of months before. There was another study in general about how folks would like to have knobs and buttons back. That's something that maybe Range Rover was already in production of the Range Rover before that study came out. So it might be a couple of years yet if they start going backwards, not backwards, but change back to having more buttons and switches.
Yeah, I have to say the one thing that we have the most problem with in modern vehicles, Emily and I, is when one of us has our phone turned all the way up and it connects via Bluetooth to the stereo system, and you turn on the car and the music is blasting and you have to just dive for the volume button to turn it back down. I can't imagine what that's like when you have to go through the menu system to get the volume back down.
Related, but different. I have in my Jetta, 2013 Jetta still has knobs and switches, right? And the one to change where you want the air to go, whether you want it to be on the fog or you want it to go to your feet or go at your eye level, that I have to almost stop the car and look at it. It's so small and tiny. I can't see where they are. So if I'm driving and I get into rainy conditions or you need to make that adjustment and change it, like, which one is it again? It's tough.
Just play HVAC roulette. Just keep turning it until you like what you get.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what you got to do. While going away from buttons and switches, going back to buttons and switches may be a good thing. It's also important to do it correctly so you can actually see what's there. Also,
exactly. They should just go back to vent flaps and it's no problem at all.
That's right. That's right. Go back to vent flaps and let the water splash on your feet. All right. Next is you could race in Land Rover Defender Rally Series. Land Rover has just announced that it is accepting applications for the third Defender Rally Series in the United Kingdom. The one make series is centered around the Defender 90, which have been rally prepped by the off-road fanatics at Bowler. The Arrive and Drive series will commence in March of 2024 and will feature 7 races across the UK. The 7-race series will feature both hill and gravel rally stages throughout the UK, including stops in England, Scotland, and Wales. Customers will also have the opportunity to participate in a select number of races outside of the UK, though details remain scarce at this time. The whole series actually seems like a fairly good deal, with the entry price listed at just around $150,000. That investment includes the race-prepped SUV, entry into all 7 races, as well as training and support from Land Rover and Bowler throughout.
You get to keep the SUV when you're done?
I'm not sure. That is unclear.
Because for $150,000, that wouldn't be bad if you got to keep it. If you had to turn it back in, then not so much.
Yeah, that's tempting to just take it slow around the course. Make sure you don't ding it up, and then you can play with it as much as you want.
That's just like one of those European delivery programs at that rate.
Next at the Bonhams, there was the Goodwood Revival sale, and there were 7 Land Rovers, special Land Rovers that went for sale, and we're just mention what they were. And I think, Dixon, you have some updates on some of them. The 1948 80-inch was supposed to go between 100 and 150,000 pounds. There was the 1953 86-inch Royal Review, and that was the one that the Queen and Philip used on their tour of Australia in 54. There was the 49 Tickford station wagon, supposed to go between 60 and 80,000 pounds. Only 20 are thought to have survived. Then there's the 1955 86-inch SAS prototype, which did sell for 71,300 pounds. And there's also, we'll have a link to that in the show notes because there's a whole long article about the original SAS prototype Land Rover Series 1. And that's from Silodrome.
Before they got the good idea to paint them pink.
The next one
was kind of a Panther Cub.
The next one was a 52 80-inch Minerva Para-Recce, 20 to 25,000 pounds. Was restored in 2010 by a former member of the Belgian Parachute Regiment. There's a 52 80-inch Minerva 4x4 ambulance supposed to go between 15 to 20,000 pounds. And it was an original CKD for the Belgian military. There's a 1948 80-inch 4x4. That was a Series 1 that's 60 to 80,000 pounds. It was the second production Land Rover and has a guide price of up to 150,000 pounds. This is a light green and professional restoration in 2019.
I understood, though, that the sale prices were not what was expected, though it's very hard to go and confirm what they actually sold for. One I was told didn't even hit reserves. What any of this means is a whole different discussion. But it certainly was quite a variety of things that are out there.
The sale took place, I think, in mid-September.
The 5th of September, early September.
All right, next up is and this is a buying guide for Range Rover, used Range Rovers. This is Range Rover years to avoid. So Range Rovers to avoid include the model years 2003, 2004, 2006, 2008, 2009, 2012, 2013, and 2022. They are considered the worst. The best years for Range Rovers are 2001, 7, 18 through 21, and 2023. This result was concluded from trustworthy sources such as NHTSA, Edmunds, JD Power, and Kelley Blue Book. And this is a online publication called Engineering, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes. But those are the ones to avoid. So if you're looking to buy, which I do see on Facebook and Reddit and some other places, I see folks asking about buying an old Range Rover. This might be a good place to start as a reference. For example, the worst of the worst is with a 3.74 rating. I'm not sure what the rating exactly means, but is a 2009 Range Rover. It says, given the few problems with the 09 Range Rover, we're hesitant to list it. However, there are a lot of issues that we can't overlook. The 2009 Range Rover has a wide variety of miscellaneous issues. Many customers have voiced their displeasure with the vehicle's drivetrain, lackluster reputation for reliability, high price, low load capacity compared to rivals, and cramped rear seating. Some users say the parking brake may make a screeching noise or not release.
It's a very interesting article, certainly worth going and looking at and so on from the show notes. But when does they start the review at? Because the P38's not in there. This certainly isn't from 1970. It's not from 87 when they came back to become the NAS Range Rovers.
Actually, the P38 is in there in the sense that the 01 and 02 were listed as some of the worst years.
Okay. So I guess it's just this century.
It might be the century or 25
80s or 90s.
I have a hard time thinking of any of those as old. Because they were made in this century.
Right.
And then they'll have links to NHTSA, to Edmunds and JD Power and Kelley Blue Book. So if you want to get some more info, they have the ratings, recalls, and complaints are listed with those. Just considered a start of a buying guide for the last 25 years of Range Rovers.
And remember, the P38s now can show up on the classic car buying lists.
Oh my God.
And another used car buying guide, because we can finally have some positive Freelander news. This is the Land Rover Freelander Mark I used car buying guide. This is out of the UK on Autocar. And it's one line. True, the Mark I Freelander doesn't have a good reputation for reliability, but with only a few still left, there's a high proportion of gold among the garbage. So if you're looking to buy yourself a Freelander, especially the Mark I, which ran from 97 to 2006, although it was only available here in North America from 2002, you can refer to this.
It's a bit of a survival of the fittest at this point. If you can find one, it's as good as you're going to get.
You really don't need this buying guide in the U.S. because if you find a Freelander that still runs, that's the one.
And it is the one because it shows up at the Vintage Grand Prix the last 2 years.
The one.
The one.
It goes past Earl Shives. It changes its color as it moves around the United States.
No, it doesn't. No, it's
all done with wraps.
It's a G4 edition. Next up is JLR honors the Queen at the Goodwood Revival. A parade of vintage Royal Land Rovers took to the track at the Goodwood Revival to pay tribute to Queen Elizabeth on the first anniversary of her death. She was fond of Land Rovers and said to have owned about 30 Defenders over the years. I suspect that's 30 Land Rovers over the years. In total, 11 historic models attended the event, including 2 of the earliest royal vehicles, the first Series 1 State Review vehicle and a Series 1 ordered by King George VI. It was the first time this collection has ever been gathered, says Leonard Hornick, who is the chief commercial officer at JLR. The vehicles on display included the very first State Review, which features a custom-designed rear platform and accompanied Queen Elizabeth on the 6-month tour of the Commonwealth. A Series 2A station wagon, which was driven by Queen Elizabeth, was on display. It was the first station wagon of its kind to be fitted with a 6-cylinder engine. Its special features include leather seats, wooden dog guard, and side steps. One of the vehicles still in use and was loaned after obtaining special approval from King Charles. With 3 doors on either side, a long wheelbase Defender 130 is nicknamed Jumbo and was modified for the royal family to support outings at the Sandringham estate. And another vehicle on display is a 2009 Range Rover, was Queen Elizabeth's favorite vehicle after it joined the fleet. And there were a number of pictures of Queen Elizabeth behind the wheel.
What year did you say?
2009. Yeah. Is that not the worst?
The absolute worst? And it's the Queen's favorite.
Yeah, she probably never had any problems with warranty claims, though.
No. And even though she knew how to repair vehicles, I suspect she didn't have to get under there and change any oil.
I suspect she wasn't bothered about the cramped seating in the rear.
That's true. That's true. Or probably didn't worry about the infotainment system either. And finally, in the news, Land Rover announced the Defender Service Awards, which takes place here in North America. You have until October 4th to vote in all 6 categories. We have a link, of course, in the show notes, so you can click on the story that Land Rover has, and that'll also get you to the voting page.
You're allowed to vote every day.
Correct. And we're, Harold and I in particular, are asking you, because we're based here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to vote for the Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group. They're in the search and rescue category. And now we're going to go talk again to Chris Roosh for an update on the Defender Service Awards. Chris Roosh is back with us to talk about the Defender Service Award. He is with the Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group. How's the voting going, Chris?
We are in full swing for the voting. One of the problems with the voting is we don't see at all how many people have voted. We have no idea how we're doing versus the competition, which means we need more votes, right? We need to keep the energy up, and we need to finish strong and get people voting every day.
Hopefully you listen to our special Defender Service Award podcast that we dropped a couple weeks ago. Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group is located in Western Pennsylvania. They're a finalist for the Search, Rescue, and Emergency Support Services Award in the Defender Service Awards that Land Rover's doing for the 3rd year in a row. There are 5 or 6 different categories, and they're part of that search and rescue. We're using, I guess, a point of podcast privilege.
That's a fancy way of saying it's our show and we'll do what we want.
Yes, exactly. So we're encouraging our listeners to vote for Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group. We're here in Western Pennsylvania, especially Harold and I, and we talk about the Vintage Grand Prix all the time. This is another Pittsburgh tie-in with Land Rover. You guys have never had a dedicated vehicle, and that's one of the reasons why you've been submitted for this.
So the team has been around since 1985, and we've never had our own vehicle. We've always relied on personally owned vehicles other than our trailer. So we have a trailer that people are pulling with their own.
A non-off-road capable trailer.
Though we stretch it sometimes.
Hey, it bounces, right?
It does.
They drag well.
What does Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group do exactly?
Yeah, we're an all-volunteer search and rescue team based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We've been around since 1985. We're a certified, accredited member of the Mountain Rescue Association and look all sorts of lost and missing people with Alzheimer's disease, autistic children, people who are injured in our state parks, boating, caving, any of those sorts of things. We help the law enforcement, our park rangers, with all sorts of missing people.
Excellent. What area do you serve exactly?
We are based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but we have members from throughout Allegheny County and the surrounding counties, and we serve all of Western Pennsylvania and some of the surrounding states. As you see in the video, we have a big circle drawn around Pittsburgh, around about a 50,000 square mile area that we assist with missing person searches in.
Up to Cleveland.
We will go all the way up to Cleveland and the National Park, Cuyahoga National Park, right there outside Cleveland.
And our West Virginia friends too, Garrett County, Maryland.
We frequently go to West Virginia, where we're positioned in southwestern Pennsylvania. We're really only an hour and a half from the border of Pennsylvania. We're one of the primary search and rescue teams for the Panhandle of West Virginia, the northern Panhandle of West Virginia, and help with mutual aid for some of our friends down in West Virginia when that's needed.
How would having a new Defender 130 help out your organization?
A couple real impactful things that would have is, one, it would allow us to respond faster. Right now, we have to hook up a trailer, and there's a limited number of people that can drive that or that have vehicles that can tow a trailer. It would be much faster, and it would allow us to have a broader group of our members just be able to go and grab the vehicle, particularly some of our folks. We have a lot of college students from University of Pittsburgh, CMU, that join our team that might not have a vehicle or don't have a capable off-road vehicle. That would be great candidates for grabbing that vehicle, bringing all of our equipment. It would really speed up our ability to respond and would help not only our team, but we are by our very nature a mutual aid organization. We're never the first organization that gets called when somebody gets missing, right? Somebody calls 911 and they get the police or they get the local fire department, and then they call us to help them. It's going to help get us out there and helping our law enforcement and fire and other search and rescue teams that we partner with throughout that really large area.
To vote for Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group, we'll have a link, of course, in the show notes, but this is for the America. Our Canadian friends are included in that. You want to vote early and vote often. The way they're doing this is you can only vote once a day per email address. Might be per IP, but let's just go with email address. And we encourage you to do that every day. You've got a couple days left. The voting closes on October 4th. I encourage you to go out to the link that we'll have in the show notes and vote for Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group, at least for the service, the search and rescue part. There's also Animal, Wildlife, and Marine. There's Community Service Award. There's the Veteran and Civil Service Outreach. There's the Outdoor Accessibility and Education. And then there's the Defender Service Award, Honorees Award for the previous finalists who didn't win. I guess they get a second chance. That's one of the awards. I guess there's 6 overall awards. Go on, vote.
A lot of great organizations out there. Obviously, Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group is the one to vote for in the search and rescue category, but yes, check out those other categories. There's some great nonprofit organizations out there doing wonderful things in the world.
And thanks to the generosity of Bobby Rahal, our local dealer, they helped put together the video, but they also loaned your organization a Defender for a few days. So you've had a chance to play with it, and you've already figured out how you want to kit it out. So we need to get those votes so that they can make that happen.
Our team is super excited. If you go out to our website, you'll see some of the pictures that we took with that Defender that Bobby Rahal gave us for the weekend. You'll see how excited our dogs were riding around in it, jumping in and out of it. And we put it through its paces and got it pretty dirty and pretty muddy in the short period of time that we had it.
That's what they're there for.
That's what they're for.
Yes.
And if you ask most dogs, they would much prefer to ride in a Rover than a Jeep.
Yes. It's Rover dog. Yeah. I see what you did there, Harold. I see what you did there.
Actually, I didn't, but happy accident.
Oh, no, it's a good one. Thanks very much, Chris. Good luck. And hopefully we'll have you back when you can show off the new 130 in its Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group livery.
Absolutely. We'd love to come back and show off our customized vehicle when you and your listeners help us win it.
Good luck.
Morgan here doing a report from the field at the 2023 British Invasion in Stowe, Vermont, looking at all the amazing Land Rovers, and wanted to talk to the owner of the St. John's Ambulance, which is here. And so welcome, Hayden.
Thank you. Honor to be on the podcast. Kind of cool.
Yeah, thank you. I'm surprised that we haven't had you on the podcast before. I've seen the vehicle, I think 2018 was roughly the last time it was here.
Yeah.
And then, of course, saw it at Greek Peak this year. Wasn't parked all that far from it in the fields camping. That was fun. And I've seen some videos of it going sideways on the trail.
It did. There were a couple spots that it got a little squirrely coming across. And at the time driving, I didn't realize quite how sideways I was. And looking at the video that I was shown later, I think I'm glad that I didn't know how sideways I was coming into that little ravine that was there in the crossing between the trails. But for the size of it, it handles surprisingly well, both more off-road than on-road, but it's not terrible to drive on-road.
Yeah, I imagine that, especially with the big, heavy ambulance body, that it's not particularly fast on-road.
That it tops out at 45, 50 miles per hour. If you're going downhill, you can get it to go a little bit faster, but obviously being designed originally to work at an airfield, you're going down the tarmac and the runway, so you're not really traveling very far in it, and it doesn't really matter. So you get up to about 60 kilometers an hour, and that's its happy spot as far as engine and gearing. And then once you start getting above that, it gets very busy to drive, and then taking it on the highway, which I've done a couple times, it feels a bit like a space shuttle coming back into the atmosphere. You're surprised at how well the vehicle's doing, and I think the vehicle's also surprised that it's still going.
I bet. And the crosswinds on the highway must be intense.
The crosswinds I think, I'll be honest, because of everything else happening, I don't think I've ever noticed the crosswinds. That becomes the least of your worries between the traffic buildup behind you that wants you to go faster, and since it's not power steering or power brake, working that side of things and making sure you don't blow the motor. And being on the right-hand drive, it makes it a lot scarier when a semi-truck passes you because the whole left is a blind spot, and so they just show up.
Yeah, especially more so in the ambulance body than any other series, because how well do the mirrors even see around the ambulance body on your left-hand side?
They don't.
Exactly.
They don't see around. Some turns are like terrible when you're coming up to an intersection because you have to, any angled intersection to the right, I have to pull out and make it a T intersection, so everyone hates you. But luckily with the lights and siren, it just adds to the confusion, so people care less.
Nice. That's good.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting vehicle to drive around, and it draws a lot of attention, both at shows and even if you're just trying to get gas or go get groceries in it.
Nice.
You have to kind of plan in to have some time that people generally will ask questions about it or just stare at it.
And this being a military ambulance, does it have the military fuel tanks as well? So are you filling up the tank under the seats?
Yes. Yeah. So it has twin fuel tanks. They're both under the seats, so you have to pull up and take the seats out to be able to fill it, which you get a lot of weird looks from the gas attendants as well, because you're now like pulling the hose into the cab of the truck.
Yep.
And I've seen some very concerned faces when they see that happening as to what is this guy doing, and they just stand there and watch.
Have they ever shut off the pump on you?
They have never shut off the pump on me, luckily.
Wow.
No, I had one come up and it looked like they were going to say something, and they got to where they could see into the cab and kind of stared at it for a second and then turned around and walked away and just shook their heads and walked back into the building. But no, luckily no one's ever shut the pump off on me, which is good.
Nice. That is good.
Yeah.
With all that discussion of it not being really a great tarmac vehicle, aside from, do you drive it to events or do you trailer it?
Most of the time, the farther events, like coming up here to Stowe or Greek Peak, I put it on a trailer. So at this point, I have a very vested interest in U-Haul. They provide a really good trailer, but it probably could be driven. There's still some hesitation, I think, on my part to drive it, especially those longer distances. And it's nice to be able to, you can throw it on the trailer, tow it with the truck, and you can also get here in a reasonable time, rather than I would have had to leave probably last week to make it here for Friday yesterday for the event. So it adds a bit of ability to maneuver time-wise around having it on the trailer, and it's not too expensive to get the trailer when you need it.
Yeah, especially like you said, not knowing exactly how much you're spending on fuel and these days.
Yeah, and the fun thing with the twin tanks is because you have the switch on the seat box, so you switch between left or right, but the gauge only reads the tank that you've turned the switch to. So you can run into issues, which have happened before, where you get to the end of your tank and it's, oh, I have a second tank, so the magical gas fairy has blessed the other tank, and you'll switch it over and it's like, oh no, that one's also empty. So where's the nearest gas station to pull into? Which luckily I've never run out of gas, but there have been times where the needle's been below the E and it's, I can see the gas station and it's up a slight hill, and it's hopefully we make it the 10 feet.
Exactly. Yeah, always an adventure. At least you still have all the... I will say, since Harold, one of our podcast members, is not here, he also has a Marshall's ambulance.
Okay.
And the nickname for them back in England, as far as I know, is the meat wagon.
I think that's all ambulances
I
across,
think so too,
across the board, but yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to see that you still have the stretchers and everything in the back. If you were to do a long trip, you could sleep, but I don't know how comfortable that would.
It's not too bad. I took it to Metal Dash last year. That was my first year going to that event.
Nice.
And I didn't want to bother with a tent or anything like that. And so I was like, yeah, I'll just sleep in the back of the truck. And I slept on one of the stretchers, and it was almost hot. I'm glad that it was cool at the event, because I think if it had been any warmer, it would have been too hot to sleep in the truck because of how insulated the back of it is. And with not like, you can open the windows and vent it and stuff, but I didn't really want to. And
Right.
so it was pleasantly warm in the truck to sleep with just like a sleep pad and a blanket.
Nice. And looking at the tear in one of the stretchers right now, I imagine you were sleeping on the stretchers, not on the beds underneath.
Yeah, so that tear is from my elbow. When you wake up and you forget where you are, and it's a weird green box, and you go to push yourself up, and unfortunately the elbow went right through a weak spot in the canvas. But since it's a square sheet of canvas, I think it should be easily repairable at some point in the future. But for now, it's part of the look.
Yeah, nice. No, and speaking of the look, I don't know, obviously we're an audio podcast, so we usually do try to include some pictures on the website, which we'll do, but it has an awesome patina. And I was talking to your father earlier, and he pointed out that it's got the sort of dark green military underneath, and then there's a few different colors that it was painted in between, and then it was white for the St. John's ambulance.
Yeah.
But the roof was never painted green. It was just painted to however far somebody could reach.
Yeah, the white.
The white.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
So you can see the MOD green on it, so it's like your classic flat Land Rover green color. Once the RAF surplused it, the surplus company did like a primer coat, which you can see, and I think it's I don't know, not copper tone, but almost like a beigey pink, and then did the white paint over it for St. John's, because that's their livery colors. They only painted as far as you could roller brush it, which when you have a curved roof is until the roof goes flat, which is also until you can't see it anymore. So standing on the ground, it would look white. But yeah, if you get on a ladder, it still has like the green safari roof over the top, and then the big white and red cross painted on the roof from when it was a military ambulance as well, because they just didn't bother to repaint any of that. So it's one of those things, every time you wash it, little bits flake off. And you can see like on the front fenders, the stenciling for the tire pressure is starting to come back from when it was in the military, because they stenciled all of that on the outsides of their trucks. And so that's the original base paint color that it would have been coming out of the RAF, which is cool to see it, because it's not just the paint, you're getting all that lettering that's slowly making its reappearance. And it's one of those things where you'd like it to come back a little faster, because you want to be able to see it, and maybe I should be inflating my tires a bit more. I don't want to like scour it or anything, because then you lose that bit of the truck's history while you're working with it, which is a cool thing to see it slowly unveil itself. Over a decade.
Exactly. And actually, speaking of that history, as you said, it was an RAF ambulance, and then went to St. John's. And I think there's an entertaining story, if I recall, about the St. John's livery on it from maybe the last event here at the British Invasion, or maybe it was a different event, because the St. John's ambulances, if I remember correctly, they were like a sort of a sports ambulance in the UK, like for sporting events. Is that true?
Yeah, so it was, for the RAF side of things, it was stationed at RAF Leeming, which I believe is on the east coast of the UK. And so they had it and then surplused it to St. John's, obviously. And so, yeah, St. John's, like in the Commonwealth, it's like a voluntary ambulance company. So they go to sporting events or car shows or sailing regattas, stuff like that, and they provide the medical tent that you'd have at those events, as well as being a normal ambulance company that you'd call 911 for, or whatever the UK equivalent of 911 is. But yeah, so this one was in Lytham St. Anne's, which I'm sure I butchered Lytham or Lytham, however the correct pronunciation of it.
I couldn't do any better.
And they used it there for sailing regattas. So it primarily, because it's on the west coast, so it did a coast-to-coast trip in England in its service lifetime, and they used it for medical events there. But the first ever car show that I took it to after it was running again was the Field of Dreams down in Hudson, New Hampshire. So it's like I guess you could call it a mini Stowe. So it's all British, and there were only like 2 or 3 Land Rovers there. And so they stuck it at the front of all the cars because it was a small grouping, so all the small marks get pushed to the front or to the side. And I had a guy that came up to it because of the livery and was talking to me and was like, oh yeah, I didn't realize like St. John's was a US thing. I thought they were only in the Commonwealth and all this stuff. And then it took 5 or 10 minutes of discussion with him for me to realize what he was talking about and for him to realize that it was a vehicle that was there in the car show and not a vehicle that was there providing medical support for the car show. And once we both had that realization, it was like it was a cool learning experience for me because I got to actually learn what St. John's was. Like, I'd done some Googling, obviously, but you can only learn so much unless you actually talk to people that have dealt with it. And he used to go to soccer events and was like, yeah, we would have St. John's come to these events all the time. And so I just naturally assumed that it was a vehicle here that the event was providing for medical staff. And he was like, until I saw how you were dressed.
Exactly.
And then it was like, why is this kid in plaid shorts and a t-shirt hanging out at this medical truck with no one else around? Kind of sketchy. So yeah, it was a funny, kind of cool interaction to have, to learn not so much maybe about the history of this truck, but about the history of the organization that it works with. And since then have had several people that have come up at different events or even driving around places that have either been paramedics or EMTs or worked with St. John's all over the world. And they're like, oh yeah, we used to work for St. John's and do this. Can I take a picture of the truck? Because they know the grouping and send it back to people that they've worked with. And that's actually how I learned the history about this, is the connection from one of those. I was able to get a contact that still worked at Lytham St. Anne's, and then they were able to dig around and actually find the history of the truck while it was in service for them.
That's awesome.
And sent me a small desk picture from it sitting in the garage, which I have on the placard up front. So it's completely white. It looks the same, and you can tell it's the same truck, but it also looks completely different to see it in a non-patinaed snow white coloring. It's a little weird almost.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool to learn because it took years of trying to track down military history, and I actually found the military registration through being able to talk to the people at St. John's, who then were able to put me in contact with the 3 different surplus companies that they got vehicles from in the late 80s and 90s. And through contacting them and sending them pictures of the truck, I actually was able to talk with the guy who not only surplused it, but was the one that did the paint job.
Wow.
On it. I sent it to him and he replied back immediately, oh yeah, I remember this truck right off, which was really cool because it's now you have the history of it from the RAF, and they were able to go through their service records to get like the 2-letter, 2-letter, 2-number military registration. So then I could trace it back through that to find out where it was actually stationed. So it's a little hazy sometimes what it did while it was in the US, but as far as the British side of things, like I've been able to track most of that down, which was really cool. Once they finally found it, and it was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense now. And I got in touch recently with RAF Leeming, and they're looking through their historical archives to see if they have actually any photos of it when it was in service at the airfield, which would be really cool to see it on the flight line or something if they have those. Fingers crossed, something will come out of that.
Exactly.
It was a slow process. I had contacted them, unfortunately, right at the start of the pandemic. And then the woman that I was talking to was like, yeah, we've gone remote, so I won't know. And they didn't go back into the office for years. So it's been like a recent kind of reinvigoration of this. Hey, do you have any pictures? Hey, do you have any pictures? And she's like, yeah, I'll look.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
That's
might
awesome.
be able to see a picture of it when it was actually in service, which would be really cool to see.
Cool, that would be. And if you get that and you want to send it along to us, we'd love to post that on the site.
Yeah, because then you can get it from MOD green to white to main field patina.
Exactly. Yes. Very familiar. It's very similar to the Vermont field patina.
It is. Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah, only a couple states over, but they tend to weather the same.
Yes. And I know that you also recently picked up a Series 1. I won't take a whole lot of your time on that, but Did you pick that one up from like the OVLR area, like up in Ottawa?
Yeah,
or?
so that one I got up by north of Toronto.
Okay.
And I'd been looking for a Series 1 because it was like I got the ambulance and then I have the TACAR 1 and then had picked up a couple other projects, but it was like I want a Series 1 and not the other ones, and saw it come up for sale and it ran. So that was a big plus. Every other truck that I've ever bought has never run when I've purchased it, and it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. But yeah, the guy was like, yeah, I can get it running and stuff. And so I ended up driving out. I had a friend in Syracuse and spent the night out there, and then drove up and then back the next day with the truck to go pick it up. And it was one of those, again, no idea what the history of it was, but it's a 1956 short wheelbase, and we tinkered around with it for a little bit, poured some gas in the carb, and it fired right up. And we were able to drive it on the trailer. It has no brakes or anything else, but it runs and it drives, and I can use it in the yard for yard work as long as you don't have to stop for anything. You have to downshift.
Honestly, that's par for the course for not just a Series 1, but any Land Rover in many situations.
Yeah, it has a nice, I think it was an optional feature that they put on it where there's a huge hole in the floor from the rust. So you can eat snacks or whatever and all the crumbs just fall right out the bottom of it. So you don't have to worry about cleaning the truck either.
Nice.
Yeah, so that one maybe it'll be at Stowe next year, but I think it'll take a little bit to get it back to registered and roadworthy if I don't want to be driving it in my backyard all the time.
And brakes might be nice to get it off of a trailer, so...
Yeah, it might be nice for everyone else around.
For people who aren't here, don't know about the British invasion, there's the Land Rover section, which there's a few very nice shiny vehicles, but all the other vehicles are like do not touch vehicles.
Well, and for some reason they always tend to stick the Land Rovers in the back corner of the field away from everyone else.
Yes.
I went to the downtown portion because I didn't go to that the last time I was here, the block party.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. They parked the Concourse DB6 Aston Martin that's here right next to me. And it was because I was getting ready to go, and then I walked around the truck and it was like, yeah, we're not going anywhere until they move. Because there was enough space to walk around it, but it was like, you have a 15-meter turning radius with this thing, so I didn't want to even try and leave with that car sitting right next to it. So it was
totally disappearing well below your blind spots. Like,
oh yeah, you couldn't even see it sitting in the truck. Like you could only see it if you got out and walked around it. I mean, it's a beautiful car.
Yeah.
And it looked funny parked next to this because it's two different realms of classic cars.
Yes.
But still very cool to see and get pictures of it in downtown Stowe next to the ambulance.
Yep. So, that's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Thank you very much for chatting with me today.
Yeah,
I know we've chatted before we even got on mic, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, happy to come on and chat. Very, very cool to be on the podcast as well as Listencast. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would wish you like good luck in the judging, but I have a feeling that most of the Land Rovers here don't bother entering into at least the concourse portion of the judging.
So I was talking to continue our conversation a little bit longer. I was talking to Dave Sweetapple about this, and I think maybe for next year I will put it in concourse. If nothing else, to get kicked out of concourse.
Exactly.
Because I don't know if they would actually allow it in once they saw what the vehicle was compared to everything else that's there.
Yes.
But it would be amusing to have it set up for the concourse side of things rather than just the field, like people's choice judging and stuff.
Yes.
If any of the judges listen to this, maybe they'll turn a blind eye to the fact that they might see that show up in their registration next year.
Yes, and I believe that even this year, Jim Macri, who usually does enter the concourse with all of his immaculate restorations, did not. Maybe to leave space for other Land Rovers, but
It could be, yeah. So maybe it'll be an off cycle if he enters next year. I know he did enter a Rover, but I think it was a two-door car. Like a 47, I don't know what model, but instead of the normal Land Rovers. But yeah, we'll see.
Excellent. I wish you luck with that next year.
Thank you. It'll definitely be needed.
Perfect. Yeah, maybe the more of the patina will have come off, and it will be a little closer to original.
Yeah, original spec. True, a lot of washing between now and then.
Exactly. Thank you again.
Of course, anytime.
Awesome.
And now joining us here on the show this month is my new good friend, Tony KIEFFER from the Minnesota Land Rover Club. Tony and I bumped into each other at Greek Peak, along with about 1,000 other people. I've been wanting to go to Minnesota's annual picnic, they call it, for several years, and I met enough people at Greek Peak and they got the bug planted. And so I went and I had a good time, had a chance to talk with Tony a good bit more, and checked out this really kick-ass off-road park in northern Minnesota, the Iron Range Off-Highway Vehicle State Recreational Area. There we go. A lot of words. Everybody just calls it Gilbert. It's much easier. And Tony was giving me the rundown on that park and some of the history of the club. So, Tony, we want to hear all that stuff. First off, let's get the compulsory part of the program. What got you into Land Rovers?
Yeah, thanks, Harold. Happy to be here and chat a little bit about Gilbert, as you said, and kind of our club back here in Minnesota, its history, and our take on Land Rovers. So excited to be here. How I got into Land Rovers many years ago. I'm 41 right now, to give you some perspective. And I got into Land Rovers in my early teens, probably really, honestly, getting stuck in the woods in a Land Rover.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And had to get wenched out. And then everyone's favorite Rover Bashing magazine, Consumer Reports, is what did it.
Were you out with family or friends?
My dad, he got a Discovery 1 back in 1996.
Bought it new?
Yeah, brand new. It was a pretty easy decision. Went and test drove the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and you see half a dozen Jeeps within 3 blocks of leaving the house. So it's just dime a dozen, right?
Yes.
Went over, sat in a Toyota RAV or a 4Runner, and didn't even have to drive it. Went down the street to the Rover dealership, and easy choice. So that was even before they had the off-road track that got you all excited to buy one.
And that was before you learned just how bad they are from Consumer Reports?
Then, yeah, you invest in this, and you know how good it is, and all of a sudden Consumer Reports is telling you why it's such an awful vehicle. I mean, come on.
Yeah, them's fighting words.
Yeah, they fall for any heartless, soulless vehicle that is efficient and doesn't break down. But come on, what's the fun with that?
Yeah, exactly. Was it automatic or stick?
That was an automatic. So it was an SE7, the Epson green with the tan leather interior. It had the stainless steel front brush bar with a big Land Rover driving lights. And then kind of unique, the side molding, which didn't look so good on some trucks, but that truck, it worked. So it was a lot of fun.
And so your dad let you drive that off-road?
Yeah, so that was right about the time I was getting my driver's license at that point. And we have a cabin in northern Minnesota. For years, we'd go out in the woods and get the Volvo station wagon as far back as we can, go visit the fire tower. But there's so much more back there. And then now we got this vehicle that can actually go and do it. Now, we didn't know what the heck we were doing, right? And we were by ourselves.
But who does?
Yeah.
By yourself. There you go. Important.
Figure out as you go. But we quickly learned why that's not a good idea, as we found ourselves down on an old railroad bed in a bog, essentially, and we had to walk ourselves back to town.
Whoa! You gotta us more on that story. You can't just leave us hanging at. You had to walk back to town.
Yeah, we walked back to town. I think we hitchhiked with the guy once we got out to at least the main dirt road, and he gave us a ride back in his fishing boat, and we rode in the boat as he drove us into town.
You're stuck when you have to get extracted in a boat.
Yeah, I might talk about my truck sale now that is not too far from the truth on another story. So once we get back in town, it's my dad and 2 of my buddies at this point, so that we're out having fun. And it's also a Sunday afternoon in October in northern Minnesota. So it's not like we got a lot of time. We got to be at school. He's got to be at work in about a little over 12 hours. So the clock's ticking. We find some guy in town to take us back there. He's got an F-250. Now, once we start going, he starts telling us how his hips hurt, so it's hard to use the clutch. So he's practically stalling out as we're going through things. And as we're getting further and further back, you can see he's getting nervous, and he's saying, my ticker's not so good. I don't know if I can walk out of here if we get stuck. So it's, oh, gee, this is just getting better. When we finally make it all the way back down there to where the truck is, we were quite relieved because there's actually a club of Jeeps going through at the same time. We're like, holy cow, they got winches, they got actual mud tires, and we're like, we're in good deal. Now, they were having troubles because one of their vehicles blew its transmission cooler and was having issues, and another guy had some other heating issues going on. But after taking my dad for $50, they were kind enough to winch us out, and we were on our way again.
Wait a minute. They didn't use the pride of pulling out a Land Rover? They charged you cash?
$50.
Insult to injury there.
Yeah, but we got out and got back home.
That's cool. Do you still have that truck in the family?
No, a few years ago, tried to kind of track it down and thought might have seen it at a junkyard, but I don't think it was the same one. My dad, he sold it in 2003, got a Series 2 Disco, had that for a few years, but not sure where the Disco one actually went to. Would be a fun truck to have again. Lots of good memories.
Yeah. What Land Rover do you currently own?
Yeah, so I have 3 right now. So
I would say it's probably been a better question. How many do you own?
Yeah, I've had to control my urges, you could say, as I'm sure many of us do. And for a while, I was accused.
Really? What's that?
I said, as some people rescue lost puppies, I was rescuing lost Land Rovers there for a bit.
Good,
but
not a bad thing to do.
They all need a good home too. Mm-hmm. So I've got 3 right now. I've got my first one I had, which is a 91 Range Rover Hunter Edition. That's kind of fun. Also known as the Swamp Machine. And there's a story there, as you can imagine. That's the kind of main one built up for most serious off-roading. Have fully airlocked front ARB, 12,000-pound winch, sliders, rear armored bumper, all the other under plates, everything else. That one's probably the biggest workhorse. I've got my 2012 LR4. That's the daily still, 230,000 miles, most reliable vehicle I promise you I've ever had. It's been great. Take that up to Moab, Montana, all over the place.
That's what you took to Gilbert this year.
Yep. Yeah, I had the kids with. I've got a son who was turned 5, actually celebrated up at Gilbert, and a daughter who was 9. Yeah,
he was the hit of the party after dinner when he got all hopped up on cake and was ripping all around.
Yeah, he likes his frosting. Doesn't eat the cake, but will eat all the frosting.
Yeah, like big scoopfuls of it.
We put together a little Land Rover cake, had a cake, and had all sorts of little Land Rovers across it. He's being properly brainwashed. He knows all the different models, and so he's right on his way.
Good, just like your dad got you hooked early. You're trying to get your son hooked early.
Yeah, you got to pass it on. So
yes.
have the LR4 and the 1964 109, which is what I drove out to New York for the slow roll with Steve Owen as well. So I was part of the support crew behind him there.
Yeah, how'd you get part of his Steve Owens Series 1 parade out to the Jubilee?
Yeah, driving at 40 miles per hour for 5 days sounded like too much fun. I just couldn't pass it up. But no.
But I'm sure the 109's got to go a little faster than 40.
It was the chance to take a 109 and not be the slowest vehicle on the road.
Hey, I've got an amazing engine that thing now, and an overdrive. I do even up to 70 miles per hour on occasion.
No, you're lying.
It's been known.
So. It's possible.
70.
I've hit 65 in the meat wagon. That's a big box pushing a lot of air.
That's got to be
conventional 109 doing 70 doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, if the road's flat, a little bit of tailwind, everything's kind of running right. Yeah, I'll hit 70. I don't like to, right? Doesn't like it, right? 40 is way nicer.
Yeah,
but
I have a 109, and when you get close to 55, then you're like, this doesn't feel right.
It cruises 61, 62. We did that on the way back. So we left Steve and Dave Alton. Dave Alton's my connection to Steve. So Dave is I think has come up on the show before here in the Minnesota Club, and he's known Steve. They did the Lake Michigan tour a couple years ago. We started talking about this and we got the group together. It sounded like fun. But no, on the way back, myself and John Wint, one of the other guys, he has a 68 109. We drove back in 2.5 days, including going all the way from the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, about 4 hours past Chicago in one day in the trucks, all the way through. horrible traffic in Chicago. I don't know if it's ever good, but this was just insane.
There's no other kind.
Yeah, so that was, I think it was over almost 700 miles and about 15 hours in the 109s.
That's a lot of driving.
That's a long 15 hours in a 109. That's a long day.
But no, the truck we did a bit of interstate. Don't like it, but we were doing it and cruising right at 63 very comfortably. Yeah, I mean, those trucks, 2,500 RPM, they just lumber along all day long. So, as Steve has said in the show, you just got to get out and drive them, and wholeheartedly agree. Just get out and drive them, make sure you got them squared away pretty well, and there's not a lot to them. Why shouldn't it make it? There's no reason.
They don't like to sit, so they're happier when they're running.
Yeah, and the most amazing thing about maybe the whole trip is I didn't burn any oil. I checked all my fluids leaving New York. When I got back, everything was right where I started. I couldn't believe it. I don't know. Maybe someone was putting it in along the way, but it wasn't me.
Maybe your truck was just absorbing all the oil coming off the trucks in front of you.
But my truck, you have to go down this road. It's essentially a brand new truck. It was sitting in a field, so it's a Minnesota original truck, sold in northern Minnesota, not far from the Gilbert Off-Road Park, back in 1964. Because there was a Chevy dealership up there that carried Land Rovers, because they were used by some of the different mines up in northern Minnesota on the Iron Range. So there's actually a fair amount of Rovers from that area at that time. And it was driven pretty regularly until 1993. And a teacher in a little town up there, he had a stroke. Now, he didn't die. I don't think he had the stroke in the truck, but he was no longer able to drive it. So it was sent off to pasture, if you will, literally, figuratively, at a friend's place where it sat for over 20 years.
Wow.
Out in the dirt. I bought it off of Craigslist for $1,000 in 2011, and it was all there, minus about a third of the frame and anything rubber. So,
right. Had the animals gotten to it?
Yeah, actually, funny story, because we went to start it up. We actually got it started after a bit of coaxing, and it seemed like it had really good compression, right? You wanted it to turn, but you just couldn't get it. You kind of hand crank it, it just wouldn't turn over. And finally, once we got started, it blew some acorns about 30 feet out of the exhaust pipe. Yep. So, yeah, there were some critters in there.
Nice little storage location for
for the but no, I went through brand new frame, redid the whole bulkhead, all new wiring, had the engine rebuilt by a great shop that only does British vehicles, and rebuilt pretty much everything besides left the body all patinaed as it is. Try to save as much of the components as possible. So it's essentially a new truck underneath an old body, but it's running great.
Sounds like the right thing to do. What modifications, or have you done any modifications to it beyond the restoration efforts that you made?
So I put in parabolic springs. You try to get the best ride. It has a ferry overdrive, so I was able to have that rebuilt. It was still in good enough shape. And I was able to save that, have a Koenig winch crank driven on the front. And I had the drive shaft rebuilt as well. So that's kind of fun.
Oh, that's nice. Special. Well, I wish I'd known that you were Greek Peak. That would have been nice to see at Greek Peak.
Although I didn't drive all the way out to New York from Minnesota with the little drive shaft on. I figure that spinning at 2,000 to 3,000 RPM is one moving part I do not need to worry about.
They start to wear, and then they start to bang on the chassis a little bit, and it creates the most confusing noise about what's going wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Especially when it's dueling with the sound of the ferry overdrive singing in your ear.
Yeah, that one's been pretty good for me so far, so it hasn't been too bad. We'll see as time goes on. But otherwise, pretty straightforward. So nothing
left-hand drive?
Yeah, left-hand drive.
Just to make just double checking. Kind of assume since it was originally here in the U.S.
That's been a lot of fun.
Tell us more about the Hunter Edition Rangey. What have you done to that, and how did you obtain that one?
I purchased that from another club member back in 2009. Guess it was at this point. And it's a California truck, so it was in real good shape. They drove it as a daily for 2 years here in Minnesota. So it's just starting to get the rust signs, but still in great shape. Right. But I'm glad I grabbed it when I did, because it doesn't see salt, doesn't see winter. It's got all the off-road goodies, kind of the adventure cart, and there's lots of trails up in northern Minnesota besides the park we'll talk about. And northern Minnesota wheeling is really tough on vehicles. It's just watery, it's sandy. There's trees you bounce off of. There's rocks underneath it. So it just really beats it up. So it looks like crap, but try to keep it running. And it's the one that best off-road truck is one you don't care about so much. If it gets an extra dent, if it's a scratch, yeah, that's what it's for.
Some people call those merit badges.
Yeah, it shows that you're actually out there doing it.
And then your latest acquisition then was a 2012 Disco 4 LR4.
Yeah, no, it's been a great truck. I'd like to get a couple more years out of it because honestly, there's not much else I'd rather have in it right now.
Yeah, that's your daily.
Yeah. The Range Rover, that has seen a little bit of water adventure. We seem to have a growing contingent of, we call it the Submariner group within the club, as far as people that drown or try to drown their trucks.
So you tried to drown your Rangey?
Yeah, a lot of the trails in northern Minnesota, they're old logging roads and also railroad lines. And they go through these areas that are used for logging, and it's pretty boggy up there. The actual path itself, it might go through some water. It's pretty good if you stay on the path. But if you get off the side of it, it can quickly fall off and get much deeper.
And the peat bogs up there, you don't know you're on one until you've broken through.
Yeah.
Unless you're really paying attention and you notice the ground is sort of undulating a bit more than you'd think. And then all of a sudden you break through and you're under the ground in the water.
Yeah, it can be deceiving. And that's kind of what happened here is we came up to a pretty good water crossing. We walked a bit of it, testing out, see what the surface is like. It wasn't too bad. And we do a fair amount of water crossings. It kind of know what we're getting into. But what happened here is it got really mucky on the left-hand side and just kept on kind of sucking me over further and further to the left, more and more in the muck, getting deeper and deeper, and just lost my momentum gradually. And as soon as that water came up over the hood and I stopped, it's just ignition off. All right, we're done here. And I'm sitting up on the center console. Within about 5 minutes, I've got 8-inch leeches swimming through my cab.
How did you get out of that?
Yeah, that's another story. So
we got time.
So there's 4 of us, right? I learned 20 years prior, safety in numbers, don't go out by yourself, and rely on Jeeps to pull you out. They'll charge you for it.
My fellow Rover drivers will do it for free.
Yeah, you might have to buy a few beers in the night, but
but that's okay. Free.
So
you were going to buy those beers anyway. So what's the difference?
Exactly. There's 3 of us hooked up the first winch, and that promptly burned itself out within 5 minutes. So now we're down to 2 winches. And it turned out that of those 2 winches, we had 1 controller. About 4 hours later, and we got it out. And what we'd have to do is we'd draw 1 winch, pull a little bit, and then do the other winch, pull a little bit. And if you've ever been stuck in a bog before, there's a little suction that you put your foot down, you put a tire down, pull it up. It's negative pressure, so it sucks you in. Just doing a straight line pull was no way that was going to happen. We had a line going down, back, I believe back down at one point. I mean, I've got a picture. This looks like Charlotte's Web out there.
Wow.
And we had another line going from the side because I was falling further into this bog. There's this floating peat bog, as Harold mentioned. You get these bogs there. So it's up at my driver's window level, and I'm kind of sliding further into it. So we had to pull off back on the road while we're going backwards.
Oh, wow.
And trying to conserve these winches as much as possible. But it happened, and
so you're pulling inches at a time, and then have to try the other winch or reposition.
Yeah, reposition the lines and everything, and then you go 10 feet, and you realize that there's a big log pointing out the direction you're trying to come backwards. So you have to go down and saw it off in the muck. So it was fun.
And you're still cleaning the mud out from under the truck, right?
Yeah, the bottom of the truck's pretty good. I've maintained that, but usually about once a year I have my window control unit on the fritz or some sort of relay I give out. So this last year the transmission finally gave it the ghost. 5 years afterwards, it's pretty good from sitting in a pond, water up to the steering wheel.
Water up to the bottom or top of the steering wheel?
The mid level. So it was up over the transmission. It was up over the radio. And pretty much up to the top.
All the electronics are submerged at that point.
Yeah.
Yeehaw.
Did you let it sit to dry out, or Did you trailer it home?
Yes, we brought it back to camp. That was the best roller coaster ride I've ever been on, being dragged out by a Disco One through a pretty legitimate hard off-road trail, just hanging on for my dear life, trying to not have this thing thrown into a tree.
Right.
And yeah, take it back to camp, drain the oil, water. Oh, there's the oil. Pull all the spark plugs. It looks like Bellagio fountain shooting water out of the cylinders. And it wanted to start at that point, but just wasn't ready. And yeah, threw it on a trailer and trailered it home, let it sit out in the sun in a parking lot for a day, came back, and it started right up. Had to replace the idle control unit, a couple little things here and there, but not bad.
There you go. As Harold said, you got yourself a battle scar from that activity. Wow. But that didn't stop you from taking it back out on the trail?
No, it's been running great. Besides the transmission, reverse gear gave out over last winter. So we threw my spare I've been keeping in the garage for such an occasion, as Rover owners do.
And reverse is just for when you didn't plan ahead and you need to change your mind.
Yeah, so got that put back in and should be good to go. We've had it other adventures. So we went all the way around Lake Nipigon. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lake Nipigon.
Yep. I'm not.
Our resident Canadian would be.
Yep, I know where it is.
Some refer to it as the Sixth Great Lake. It's been referred to, but it's due north over Lake Superior, and it's look it up. It's a good body of water, great as far as for salmon, and there's no road that actually goes around it. But we drove around Lake Nipigon a few years back. A few members in our group. If you go up the western side, there's a little town called Armstrong. Armstrong was known back in the day because there was a early warning radar station there for NORAD, right? For the missiles coming over from the Soviets or the ice caps. And that's been since abandoned. But since there was a military installation, they needed two roads, one in, one out as a backup in case something went out. So there was a road at one point that went over to the east side, crossing a river. But according to the Ministry of Natural Resources in Canada, as we talked to them, they said they blew it up a number of years ago because the native populations on each side of the river were going back and forth and taking each other's game, and they were starting to fight. So the Ministry of Natural Resources said, all right, let's get rid of the bridge and leave each other alone. So there was old roads. We bushwhacked our way down about 16 miles of a road that had been used in 20 years. And I'm not kidding here, where you look at the ground in front of you and all you see is brush. You're just driving through over trees 2 inches in diameter. And again, don't care if you get a scratch or two. But you look up into the skyline and you can see the thinning of the trees of where the road was. We did that. Yeah, that was a whole day. Again, that little 16-mile kind of lost section, if you will, until you get to this rather large river crossing and cross the river to the other side where there's logging and you're kind of home free.
Yeah, I see Armstrong on the map. They actually have a little bit of an airport, and there's a little bit of, they have an elementary school. So so it's at least it still seems like a functioning town and to some degree.
There's a railroad that goes through there, the Trans-Canadian Railroad, I believe it is. There's a little mining town east, or mining site rather, about 2.5 hours to the east down a dirt road. But that's where the road ends, essentially.
And how long did that trip to circle Lake Nipigon take?
We did that in, I think about 4 days. So it's about 10 hours, 11 hours from Minneapolis, where I'm located, to get up to Armstrong. And then a day to cross kind of that lost section of a forest, make the river crossing. Another day back down the east side, and then another day home. We moved through it pretty quick. It's just that little section in the middle. First, we're aware of, there's no vehicle that drove around the lake about 30 years before we did it.
Is that the Mud River?
Yeah, I believe. I'd have to double check on the map. But that river crossing, that was no joke. Consequences are real up there if you lose a vehicle, right? I mean, we're up there.
You're a whole lot farther from home if something goes wrong.
Absolutely. There's no trailer to go back to camp a half hour away. So
you actually had to ford the river.
Yeah, we walked it, and a lot of the old bridge was still in the river, much to our chagrin. And the big, huge railroad spikes holding it together were all still poking up and directly to the direction we were coming from.
Oh, neat.
Sounds like they didn't want to make it easy for anybody to cross that.
So we took about an hour and we staked out our route. And fortunately, you could kick the spike, and with about a couple of kicks pulled out of the wood, it had been sitting in the river that long and cleared what we thought was a pretty good path. And somehow I drew the short straw. I was the first one to go, took off the fan belt and covered up the radiator and squirted the distributor down with WD-40 and gave it the best shot. And I got all the way to the end until I stalled with my vehicle, the front out, the rear still in. But I was on dry land, so winched the rest of the way up. And then we connected my truck to the truck behind us with a large strap. So if they got stuck in the middle, I could pull them through. And we just kind of pulled each other through one by one like that.
How many trucks again were there?
There was 4 of us.
4 of us. And what else was traveling with you? Was it an entire Rover contingent?
You guys might remember Dr. Rick from Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So he had his Disco 1 300 TDI. Why he didn't go first to the river, I don't know.
He's got the one that's the hardest to stall in the water.
Exactly.
But, he didn't draw the short straw, according to you.
Yeah. I don't know how that happened. So he was there, and then Gustav Kubitz, he has a 110, a NAS 110, but actually at that point, that too had a diesel engine in it, a 2.8. So I don't know, again, why I'm going first.
Why didn't he go before you? Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And then there was one lowly Toyota Tacoma that we brought with just for posterity's sake.
So you should have made him go first.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was a great trip.
I would have bookended the crossing with the diesel, send the other stuff in the middle. That way you've always got one at either end of the train that is still running.
I think we had some rationale. Don't ask me what it was, but
the rationale is let's pick on Tony.
Yeah,
sounds like a hazing ritual.
We had to legitimately build a bridge along the way as we're going through that kind of lost section of trail. The beavers got to a section and they cleared a little canal for themselves, and this thing just went straight down and then over. So it was much too steep of a drop in and out to drive through it. So it was easiest to build a bridge, and there's no lack of timber. So rounded up a number of trees and built ourselves a nice bridge. And there again, I was the first one going through off of that, think of it. But it held, and that was actually the second time we had to do that, build a bridge, a legitimate bridge to get across up in Canada.
Well, on this journey, you forded one river. You went through the brush for about 16 miles, and you built 2 bridges to cross said river.
Yeah, not the big river, other parts.
Other smaller rivers or streams.
Yeah.
Okay, and you still did it in what, about 16 days, and no one got hurt? Any vehicle problems? Everything go okay with the vehicles?
Vehicles, trying to think. No issues. They're good. I mean, it's a Rover. What can go wrong?
Yes, as we all know, and yes, usually they fail you close to home. Is typically you'll drive 16,000 miles, everything's fine. You're like 6 miles from home, and I'm done. I'm close enough.
We'd like to get out in Canada, up north of Minnesota, right there in Ontario. There's just limitless opportunities, trail riding, waterfalls, beautiful lakes, and we've only scratched the surface. But that Nipigon trip, that was kind of one to just put on the list there, and a nice one to check off.
Now, was that a Minnesota club activity?
And we had the Toyota with, so I guess it technically wasn't a club. No, the other guys from the club.
As I understand it, your club is known to entertain interlopers from time to time.
You were out there, weren't you?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of my point.
You are the past president of the Minnesota Land Rover Club, is that right?
Yeah, I was president, I don't know, about maybe 10 years ago now. But we have a 2-year term limit. There is now, I think it's called the Todd exception, because we didn't have anyone else to take it. So Todd he got the 3rd year.
Tell us more about the club. How long has it been around? Did you know how it started?
It's been around, we've been active since 1984. So help me out, Dixon. How long has Ottawa Valley been around for?
As a club proper, which started off as a chapter of the ANARC since spring of 1984, though it really started probably in 1983, because there's newsletters that go back for what they called Operation Frank, but it's really an offshoot of ANARC, which is 1974. But in terms of longevity, in terms of continuous operation, Minnesota would be the second longest running club in North America.
Yeah, that's my understanding. So you said it, not me, but T4 was our very first now annual picnic that Harold mentioned earlier and visited. We've been in continuous operation in one form or another since then.
And how long's the picnic? Yep. Was that from the very beginning?
Yeah, that was because it first was taking place really a collection of owners up in Duluth, Minnesota, which is at the port city at the tip of Lake Superior, northeastern Minnesota. And with those rovers I mentioned up in the Iron Range area, they had a few people around there and they said, hey, let's get together. Let's swap parts, knowledge, stories. And kind of one thing led to another. And that's how it all began. We actually have our original, one of 3 original members with his original truck still in the club.
Nice.
What takes place at the picnic? Is it a car show? Is there off-roading? Is it a 3-day event?
It's always the first or the second weekend in August. So mark your calendars now. Second weekend in August, come out to Minnesota, join us up north, and you can go and try your luck at the sandy soil and water and logs that will get your truck up as well.
Are we going to Gilbert again next year?
No, we usually try to maybe every 3 years do Gilbert. Gilbert has a little bit of kind of hit and miss as far as what people like in the club. So there's a few other places that we tend to go to as well. But as far as the picnic, what it is, it's just getting together, going out and do some trail riding. We have the picnic itself that Saturday evening, which is just a potluck. People bring stuff in, sit around the fire, catch up, tell stories. And it's the kind of one big event that the club seems to has that everyone turns up for. Have lots of other smaller stuff throughout the year, but this is just the annual one, always in the calendar, the same dates, and bring your new truck, your old truck, your series, your Defender, whatever, and we'll go have a good time.
There had to been like 50 or 60 people there this year, I think.
This year wasn't too bad. I can't remember how many trucks, about 25, 30 different trucks or so, and a lot of family. We're a real family-orientated group. Yeah, we've got a lot of people that have grown up in the back seat, the car seat. Now they're driving and have their own vehicles. So that second generation is coming up and fun to see. Just have a good time.
I realize you move around to different locations every year, but is it always, I take it, in the northern part of Minnesota? Is there a general region if people are planning they would like to come, they were going to drive out, they have a sense of where they should be going?
Go way back, like 1985, I think it was in northern Wisconsin. But beyond a couple of really early years, it's always been northern Minnesota. That's just where the trails opportunities are, because there's, whether it's Gilbert, the park, or it's just overall trails on state and county lands, national forest lands, you've got pretty wide variety that's available out there. We did meet in a little town called Bacchus, Minnesota, for about 10 years continuously. So that was all throughout the 90s. And that's actually how I came to be a part of the club, because going back to my dad and his Disco One, our cabin was just outside of Bacchus, our family cabin. That next summer, after we got stuck, we went to the grand opening of the local Land Rover Center in Minnesota, the Eden Prairie Land Rover. And some members of the club had their trucks out, and they actually had the printed newsletter on display and the windshields. And the calendar of events, picnic, Bacchus, Minnesota. Wait, is this the same Bacchus where our cabin is? And sure enough,
can't be too many of them.
Yeah, the Land Rover group has been having this picnic about 2.5 miles away from our cabin for the past 5 years. At that point, we had no idea. So we were happy as clams, and the rest is history.
Easy to fix that problem.
If folks are interested in coming to the picnic, is there like registration? Where do they get more information, and so they can begin their planning?
We've got a Facebook page. That's probably the best place to see what's going on. I'm not on Facebook, so I don't watch it real close myself. But yeah, I'd love to get in touch, reach out through Facebook. And I don't think we have a club email at this point. Things have kind of, we're pretty relaxed, right? Yes. Pretty relaxed.
That's even more relaxed than the Fort Pitt group, because at least we have a website and there's ways to contact them.
We've got a website, but it hasn't been updated in about 8 years now.
I'm looking at Facebook right now at the Minnesota Land Rover Club Facebook page, and it has the 31st annual picnic is in Cloquet, I think.
Cloquet.
Cloquet.
Okay.
In 2018. Hasn't been updated. The banner hasn't been updated.
That's more up to date than the website, apparently.
By 2 years.
By 2 years, exactly. I'm sorry, how long is the event? Is it just a weekend? Is it 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, weekend event. So people typically arrive up there Friday. Some stay over until Monday.
And it's a camping activity?
Yeah, I mean, some people stay maybe in a local accommodation, but typically those are tenting and trailering it.
How about the newer Defenders? Do they come out?
Not on the trail. I think we still only have maybe the Bond Edition 110 as the sole new Defender representative in the group, if I'm not mistaken at this point.
And that did not show in Gilbert this year.
We've been trying to get Rick to just to take it out and prove its worth, but he's been a little shy for some reason.
Well, if you've seen him drive, he probably doesn't want to mess it up.
Yeah, which is fair.
Everything else he owned was there, so you can't fault him too much.
Yeah, he keeps busy.
What other activities does the club hold?
We kind of got 3. I mean, I'm sure this is pretty similar to other clubs. We kind of got 3 different contingents. We got those that really like Gilbert because it really is a little more conducive to the challenge, hardcore kind of rock crawl. We got really built up trucks that like that. Those that more into kind of the overland camping, getting out, enjoying northern Minnesota, just get back to that lake and go more distance. I've done a lot of work with that with the Four-Wheel Drive Association of Minnesota. We can talk about that later if you like. And then a growing series contingent that doing some camping as well, but also car shows and more kind of series stuff. That's been really fun to see and be a part of as well the last couple of years.
I guess you get representatives from all of Minnesota.
Yeah, we've got across the state, Wisconsin, down into Iowa. We've had folks in the Dakotas, but mostly the Twin Cities metro area.
Tony, in addition to the annual picnic, what other meetings and get-togethers does the club have?
Yes, we do have a monthly meeting. I think it's the third Thursday of the month. And right now we're meeting at a local brewery. They give us the basement and we have a pretty loose agenda to go through, but different swap stories, just like any other club meeting, I'm sure. And that happens each month. Probably the best attended besides the picnic is the annual holiday party, usually the second weekend of December. For a while, we were having that out at a local hunt club, spend the night and gourmet dinner, go out, drive the Rovers around after dark, see if we can tear up the property a bit without getting yelled at. And so that's been a long-standing one. We actually just this last weekend had the first what's to be an annual event up at a members cabin outside of Two Harbors, Minnesota. So it's on the northern shore of Lake Superior. The idea was it's called the Fall Art Rover Tour, or affectionately known as the FART.
I see what they did there.
Yeah.
And it's based over at this members cabin, but in the local surrounding area, there's local artisans, really a pretty big community. And they have an art crawl that goes on. Come up Thursday night, Friday, go do some art crawl stuff, a little bit different tempo than what we're kind of used to. But bring the family, bring the spouses, come back. We're setting up trials courses on the property. He's got a number of different trails throughout the property, through the woods, across the river that goes through. He's got an island in the middle of this river where we set up the Rover bar. So he's got Dixon, kind of like that Rover old dealer sign you have on your background. We set that up in the trees and we built a bar out on the island, big bonfire. It's down kind of in this big ravine and it was great.
Very nice.
Yeah, so do that Saturday, do a little touring up the shore and come down to Duluth and have stay at a hotel, get all dressed up, cleaned up, and have a fancy dinner. That was the first inaugural one, but mark your calendars for next September. Come out and join us.
So the trick is to come out in August for the picnic and then just don't leave the state for a month.
There you go. You have about 6 weeks to go around, head out west, come on back.
You can go, you can go circumnavigate Lake Nipigon. That should probably take you about 6 weeks, depending on what you're driving, because you got to ford some streams and rivers and build your own bridges.
Maybe duck out the way of a moose or something too.
That's true. Did you see any moose when you were there?
Let's see, I'm trying to think. We have in the past. I'm not sure about that trip, but yeah, have occasionally see them. Where I remember one time we were crossing the border into Canada. It was late at night, and about a half mile in, the biggest timber wolf I've ever seen in my life alongside the road.
Oh,
so it's wild country. It's Canada, eh?
Yeah. Is there moose in Minnesota?
It's been a declining population for a number of years now, so they actually don't do moose hunts anymore, but they're up there.
Oh,
okay. Up in the Boundary Waters, there always used to be moose up there.
They're around, not as much, but otherwise, other events, we have historically done an ice event, being Minnesota as it is, go out in the lakes. They freeze over here in the wintertime, enough to drive on them and go do racing courses and blindfold driving and all sorts of.
Have you done that?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And you in which truck or all of them?
Here, that was mostly in the Classic, the Range Rover. So kind of one time might take it out, but it's been a couple of years since we've done one, since we had a little bit of a run-in with law enforcement and a kind of a miscommunication. And yeah.
Ooh, there's a story.
I like we had a run-in with law enforcement, little miscommunication, officer. So you're not technically allowed to drive on frozen lakes?
Well, apparently not in Hennepin County, which is the county that Minneapolis resides in.
Yeah,
so
a little too urban there.
Yeah, news to us, right? We were exiting, at least I should say, 95% of the club had left, and then the couple people that were cleaning up as they're driving off, they get stopped.
Oh yeah, the stragglers are the ones that get caught.
And it wasn't so much we were driving on the ice; it was we were having a non-approved, sanctioned event. Apparently, there's a permitting process.
Yeah, without your permit to gather or whatever it is.
I thought that was covered in about one of my amendments to congregate and assemble.
And is that something that'll be planned for this year?
We've been talking about it. We've been threatening. So it's just finding a non-metro lake. And
well, sounds like you need to start the permitting process now.
Well, there's plenty of lakes up north.
We're known for them.
I grew up in the only county without one. There's that too.
There's a county without a lake?
Yep, there are no natural lakes in Olmsted County. There's about 7 fake lakes now, but no natural lakes. It's the one county.
Let's turn our attention to the Iron Range Off-Road Vehicle State Recreation Area, which apparently is in Gilbert, Minnesota, and that's why you have been referring to that off-road vehicle state recreation area as Gilbert, because it's tough to say Iron Range Off-Road Highway Vehicle State Recreation Area. Jeez.
Yeah, Gilbert's a lot easier to say.
What's that about, and how did you get involved?
I guess there's only 3 states now, Minnesota being one of them, that has a state-sponsored and administrated off-road recreational area. So it's managed by the state, it's run by the state, it's open to the public, and
it's a full-on state park.
Yeah, it's been open since 2002. And essentially, it's on an old mine. Northern Minnesota, that area, it's known for the iron ore mining that goes on, richest deposits of iron ore in the world. Actually,
hence the name Iron Range.
You come out there and your clothing, your vehicle will be stained red because that dirt is just like glows orange. Harold, have you got it all out of your vehicle yet?
Oh, it's still on the outside of the truck. It's still got, because it's a white truck, so that pink's going to be there a long time. But more importantly, I got it out of my dog.
Yeah, that could be. I can see that was a challenge.
Yeah, he was a member of the Pinkfoot tribe pretty quickly.
It's been open since 2002. I think it's about 1,200 acres and includes trails for trucks, ATVs, motorcyclists, but it's a motorized vehicle recreation park. So you don't have to worry about mountain bikers come around the corner, running into you, worrying about people bird watching. It's hunters in the fall. It's motorized park.
You do have to watch for hikers once people's trucks break and they're hiking back out.
There is that time to time. Actually, we had a member who got his truck stuck, and they closed the park at, I think it's sunset, and they got locked in, and they had to call the sheriff to come and unlock the gate so they could walk out. They abandoned the truck, came back the next day.
So it's all motorized vehicles? Is it dirt bikes and ATVs or just?
Yeah, dirt bikes, ATVs, trucks. And there's something like 36 miles of trails in there. This is the first site, the original. And then next door, there's what's called the expansion area that goes up towards the town of Virginia, if you're looking at a map. And that's something like 2,700 acres. Harold, that's what we drove through.
Right. Yeah, it's a 13-mile loop according to the book of maps that Dr. Rick gave me.
So that's more of just a single core trail through that area now, and some roads that had previously been there. But
are they planning to add trails to that expansion area?
Yeah, because that kind of just more or less opened up. And what will happen, this is what happened in Gilbert, the original park, is the administration of the park works with local clubs to identify areas to build trails, and the clubs can go out and build trails themselves, bring in a dozer from the maintenance shop, clear a trail section. Like the Land Rover Club, we built one of the trails in Gilbert 20 some years ago before it opened. That's how they got a lot of the manpower, just invited the clubs in and say, hey, what do you want to do? What do you want out of this place? This is your guys' place to go. So tell us what you need, build your trails, and make it what you want.
It's not often you hear about the state asking people what they want.
I don't know. Minnesota likes to give away money, though. It's sometimes a little too much, perhaps.
What's the nature of the trails? What are they like? Are we talking, is there trees, rock crawling, flat ground? So
yeah, Harold, what was your first impression being there for the first time as a interloper, as you said?
Yeah, I mean, we took the easy trail through the expansion area, and I'm thankful for that because I was 1,000 miles from home. I didn't really want to break too much serious stuff.
Although you did break down.
I did. I was that guy who blocked the trail, yes, while I fixed my truck. But fortunately, it was a minor thing. It wasn't like axle damage or something that would have really, really messed me up being so far from home. But no, I mean, it was nice because as parts of it seem like it's no big deal. And then you hit a spot that's a challenge. And my biggest thing was just turning corners in the woods and not hooking the sides of my flatbed on the trees because I'm pretty wide in certain parts of my truck. It was challenging enough for me, definitely.
Yeah. So what's the rest of the terrain like then in Gilbert?
So the original park, the Gilbert part, we'll refer to Gilbert and then the expansion site, just to kind of keep them separate for listeners. And the Gilbert part that's been open since 2002, it's all based on an old iron ore mine. And give you an idea, I mean, they've been mining this area for over 100 years. And that's where all the steel for you guys back Pennsylvania, Northern Ohio, it comes from northern Minnesota, goes to steel mills out east, and then back down to Detroit to make vehicles and whatnot. It's hugely energy intensive, and the amount of material they have to pull from the ground is something I was talking to a guy up there who's been up there his whole life and part of the formation of the park, Denny Pershern. He's lived there his whole life, and he says that it's 5-to-1 ratio that they need to pull out of the ground to get for iron ore. And the biggest mine up there to this day is still doing over 18 million tons a year. They're pulling out 90 million tons of material a year and leaving 70 million of it just sitting in these piles. Harold, that when we had lunch, we're looking out over the distance. It's not mountainous, but it was pretty hilly. And those are all the old mine tailings.
And so that's what the park is built upon then, are these pilings of cast off iron ore?
Yep. I mean, have good tires, right? It's been known to slash a few.
Right.
And it's got all sorts of different elevation changes, pits, ledges, but really it's loose shale. So
yeah, it's just mountains of packed gravel. The tailings are just all the junk you throw away because it doesn't have iron in it.
A lot of close trees and brush.
It's been 50 years that a lot of stuff's been sitting. I guess the mine that Gilbert is on closed in 81. I mean, 40 years at least. Other areas, I'm sure, longer within it. So you got a lot of pine trees growing up, but you go through one area in the beginning, and it's like a moonscape, and you think the dust on Moab is fine in orange. This is next level. You got trees, you got rock, you got some big, huge boulders that they have rock crawls. And you get buggies doing. You've got some core trails you can take your stock vehicle through, and it's all rated. So it's like a ski area where you got your greens, your blues, your blacks, and a decent idea kind of what you're getting into.
And it's all well labeled so you know where to go.
They got maps and everything.
Is there a cost?
No, it not besides having an OHV sticker. So that's actually what covers the cost of the formulation, the foundation, the administration of the club is this dedicated fund that the Minnesota Four-Wheel Drive Association has set up and is funded through the sale of these off-highway vehicle stickers that whether you go to Gilbert or any of the other designated off-highway vehicle trails, supposed to have this little sticker on your license plate, costs like $30 a year. I don't know, Harold, would they charge you as a
As a non-resident, I paid $31 and I'm good for 3 years.
There you go. That's must not be a difference between.
Yeah. So I got to come back to get my money's worth out of it. So you'll be seeing me again.
See you next year. That covers from that dedicated fund is what really covers the ongoing administration, but it's not a per use thing.
You mentioned you were part of the Minnesota Four-Wheel Drive Association. They're the ones, I guess, that you get these stickers from, so you can go use the off-road facilities in Minnesota. How did you get involved in that, and how does that relate to Gilbert?
So it's kind of interesting. I mean, kind of think how to phrase it here. I think a lot of the Four-Wheel Drive Association, the state park, a lot of it stems from the history of snowmobiling. Got a great history, strong history of snowmobiling in Minnesota. You got to do something in the wintertime. And there's thousands of miles of trails across northern Minnesota. In the 90s, you got a lot of the truck guys that are also snowmobilers. And they thought, wait, can we create something similar, but for trucks? And the Minnesota Four-Wheel Drive Association has been around since 1987, is to promote opportunities, work with the state. We've got a lobbyist to protect the land that we do have access for, to try to get new parks, new areas. And there's this mine that was sitting closed, abandoned since 1981. And it was determined to be a suitable site that, hey, can we do something here? Because it's already environmentally disturbed. I mean, it's a mine, right? What more harm are you going to do? And that's kind of where it came from. I was part of the Four-Wheel Drive Association, besides just a member, for about maybe 10 years, working with land use, working with their legislative committee, going testifying in front of the legislator about the need for these type of areas, how it can benefit a number of people across the state. Because we've been really active with the success of Gilbert to try to not only expand that location, but give residents other opportunities throughout the state to use their vehicles in a legal, productive way as well. We did a lot of work with them.
And relatively safe too. So as you said, being legal, you don't have the cops trying to pull you off the ice.
So that's the thing. It's like you give someone a big truck with big mud tires, they want to get it dirty.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. You want to test it. You want to see what you can do and what it's capable of, and that's what it was designed for.
Yeah. So there's a lot of trails up there, but they're all different designations of where you can go, where you can't go. And the state in 2003 did a big classification that closed a lot of areas to vehicle recreation. So a lot of the old logging roads, maybe you drove down, went out with some friends. Now all of a sudden you can't go there, or maybe you can go here, but you can't go there. And it's not always really evident. About 10 years ago, I did a lot of work with some people just kind of casually, where we looked at maps and mapped out a trail from central Minnesota all the way up north, hooking to the east, the Superior National Forest, ending on the north shore of Lake Superior. And it was about a little over 500 miles long and 90% on dirt. And working with the Four-Wheel Drive Association to see, hey, can we turn something like this into an official trail? One of our other club members, actually, a number of years before that, kind of planted that seed with the Four-Wheel Drive Association. They're all Jeep guys with 37, 40-inch tires and mud bog and rock crawl. What do you guys go and pick flowers and smell the roses? You Rovers guys think they're kind of a little odd, but they didn't get it. But now
they don't know about overlanding.
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of before overlanding, and now kind of things have come full circle. And it's like, wait a second, this is how we get out and reach the masses and bring in more funds, more support. We established this informal trail and then started working with the Four-Wheel Drive Association, working with the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, the legislature, try to get funding and to make something happen. So actually now it's on the final stages of a 750-mile touring trail that goes from across northern Minnesota, border to border, Lake Superior, all the way out to North Dakota. So there's different opportunities like that are popping up, and did a fair amount of that work.
That sounds like a fun club activity to overland that.
It's using all existing roads, everything from there's some paved sections to gravel roads, county roads, to old logging roads, minimum maintenance roads. That's not going to be the most challenging thing, although there are plans to hopefully build challenge areas and loops off of it. But the idea is that okay, I can go with the family and I can hit these kind of back scenic byways, but do it on dirt.
Yeah, it's overlanding.
Yeah, and see some lakes, stop and camp. Again, that kind of traditional, maybe Western overlanding style travel, but here in northern Minnesota, where you have a great history of logging industry, mining history, forestry, and fishing with the lakes and everything else. So it was needed because when we were really discovering as far as, okay, how can we link these roads together, there was no map that showed everything, because you have 3 different governing bodies responsible for the various lands, actually 4 if you include Indian reservations. And you got county lands, which are just, there's no maps with any roads. That's just blank spot on the map. You've got state forests, which have their own maps and follow the state classification of where you can go. And then you have the national forest, the Superior National Forest, which is the entire northeastern part of the state with its own classification in maps, which are less than useful. So it really becomes a nightmare to understand, okay, how do I go from point A to point B on dirt and do it in a way that I'm not going down roads that are closed or going to lead me down some little road that goes in a direction I'm not trying to go, or into something I want to avoid.
Or ends up being illegal because it's private land in some capacity that they don't want you there.
Yeah, so that's where the Four-Wheel Drive Association has been trying to kind of fill those gaps, build some maps, get some support to create a baseline, really on the heels of the success of Gilbert, and seeing how people want to go out. They want to recreate in a motorized way, and appeals to a pretty broad section of the population.
And it can also help bring some tourism into areas that probably typically don't get visitors.
Yeah, you talk to the people across Gilbert, and there's some skepticism. I mean, an off-road park is a great example in NIMBY, not in my backyard. Who wants an off-road park, right? Right up there at the nuclear power plant, probably. Motors, dust, people flying around. And there's those concerns in Gilbert. That was one of the big obstacles back in the late 90s as this was really getting going. But it's essentially saved the town.
It's done a lot for the local economy. I mean, where would that campground be without all the people staying and going to the park?
Yeah, that's the biggest draw, that campground. So it's a city-operated, owned campground. So I'm sure that's a great revenue source for the city. Harold, you saw it. That thing is busy. It's
it was packed. It was sold out. Rick happened to have a spare place, and so I was able to sneak in. But yeah, apparently, if you want to go in August, you got to get your campsite reserved by April.
Yeah, so they open up reservations, I think, sometime in April. And the first day, we blocked off the ones we had, but we weren't the only ones doing that. It just fills up like that. There's a real need for more campsites. And I heard somewhere around kind of 5,000-6,000 people attending a year to the park. It's going to be crowded where you're waiting in line in traffic, but there's always people there going through.
Unless there's a line of you needing to get your sticker at the ranger station on a Saturday morning, then there's a line. But that's
a different story.
Yeah.
I was looking at the map for Gilbert, and there's a Gilbert pit just north of the park, and it's in parentheses, it's Lake or Be Gone.
Yeah, right at the campsite. And it literally is I think it's 2 mines, abandoned mines that were kind of connected and then just filled up with rainwater. And the lake, I think, is like over 400 feet deep. And
it's a big lake. There's boats on it and stuff.
Yeah. And it's a national diving site. Along with the four-wheelers, you get people who are scuba diving there because it's over 400 feet deep and the clarity is crystal clear. So they've got old helicopters down there, and there's mine shafts you can go down. So there's a lot for the divers as well.
It's an underwater scenic tourist area.
For those listening at home, get some idea, Gilbert's about 3 hours north of Minneapolis, or about 180 miles.
I was looking at the map there. It's looks like 53 coming out of, how do you say that?
Cloquet.
Cloquet? Is that how you say that?
Cloquet. Yeah, Cloquet.
That's how you say it.
It goes back to the French fur trading days.
Back when that part of the state belonged to France.
Harold, how long did it take you to get out there from Pittsburgh?
I went through Rochester and stayed for a day, so I think it was about 1,150. But if I had driven straight from Pittsburgh, it'd be really close to 1,000 miles.
I mean, pretty feasible from that part of the country. So right now, we'll see what happens. But I think our club is actually slated to host ANARC at some point in time here at Gilbert. Now, it says next summer, 2024. There's a few more logistics that need to be figured out for that to happen, because there's as far as where does everyone go, this campsite we've been talking about is pretty crowded from day one. It'd be fun to have people out. So we've done that circle tour around Lake Superior and end up at the picnic in Gilbert, doing something like that, but that requires a lot of logistics, and next year might be a little ambitious, but we'll see if we can't make it happen at some point down the road. It'd be great to have some more people out up to that neck of the woods.
I think it'd be roughly equivalent, people that are out in our end of the country driving out there, as it was for when all you guys drove to Greek Peak this past summer.
About the same distance. Absolutely.
Dix and I are part of the ANARC board, and there's still discussions as to what it means to have an ANARC event, and that probably will include doing part of the ANARC Cup. So you would have to host
even more organizing. You're saying that we'd have to do and get ready for.
There would be,
we better talk 3 years out. 3 years out.
There would be some organization. The thought would be at multiple ANARC events throughout the year that would allow you to compete in the ANARC Cup. Those are the details we need to work out.
You guys just send your advanced committee, right, and set everything up for us and welcome people in. So we just sit back as the host and have a drink. Is that what I heard?
That's exactly what you heard. Yeah.
There's a lot going on. It was fun. So that was a fun event. I enjoyed it.
It was, yes. We certainly talk about having another Jubilee style event, but when's that going to happen? And those of us who were intimately involved in the details are like, at least not 5 years. It's that's the minimum. If you want to do it in 3, nope, someone else will.
Yeah, I think 5 is separated enough where people can plan other events, but still around that, and it still stays special, but also soon enough that there's some planning momentum that's not lost.
I think twice per decade is often enough for an event of that magnitude.
What I want to know, you traveled in your Series 3 all the way to the Jubilee and back. Was it 15 hours or something? I believe you drove that in one stretch. I want to know how long your arms were vibrating after that. Because I know when I drive my Series 3, I can do about 4 hours, and then there's 2 hours after that. All that virtually comes through the steering wheel.
The 2As, they drive like a Cadillac.
Wait a minute here.
Here we go.
Okay.
No,
I see what you're saying.
I don't think it was my arm so much, but the base of my neck, it felt like there's a vice grip in between the shoulders just from having the arms on the wheel and holding it steady. That Chicago traffic without power steering and their road construction I thought I was going to die. I mean, I'm doing 55 through this construction zone, and you got people whipping past at 70 plus, and you're going over these corrugated drainage surfaces back and forth where they have lanes and being tossed about, and then you got a semi that roars past you and get me out of here. This is crazy.
There's no fun there. There's no fun. That's the part of Rover ownership that we don't usually talk about too much, because there's no fun there.
Although I didn't have to pay any tolls because they couldn't figure out my classic vehicle license plate that is hidden underneath the ladder. So I made it through the Illinois toll system without any cost. I should admit that here on a public podcast.
You're a scofflaw. You got through, didn't have to pay any tolls. A vehicle that old, I think it should really not have to pay, because you're keeping it on the road. Tony, thanks very much for coming on the podcast, talking to us about the Minnesota Land Rover Club, its history, your trucks, and also Gilbert, which is officially known as Iron Range Off-Highway Vehicle State Recreation Area. Yes, that's the full name and official name. Now you know why they call it Gilbert, because that's where it's located. We'll have links, of course, in the show notes to all of that information. And thanks again, Tony. We appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, very welcome, and look forward to seeing more people out of Gilbert in the future.
We hope you enjoyed show number 126 for September of 2023. Thanks to our guests this month, Tony KIEFFER with the Minnesota Land Rover Club. And also thanks to Morgan for doing a field report with Hayden Pearson.
Yes, thank you to Hayden for that. That was great.
And thanks, of course, to Harold and Dixon coming on the show. And thanks, of course, don't want to exclude Morgan. Thanks, guys.
No problem.
Thanks for having me.
And don't forget the One True Packs, continued production support. We appreciate all that PAX does. Don't forget to vote for the Defender Service Award, especially for the Allegheny Mountain Rescue Group in the search and rescue category. You can vote daily, and you only have a couple more days. It ends on October 4th, but you can vote daily from as many different email addresses as you wish.
Yeah, and while you're there, there's some Canadian ones you can vote for. There's the Calgary Veterans Service Society, out of Alberta. There's the Honor House Society out of New Westminster under the Veteran and Civil Outreach Awards. There's quite a few different things in here that you really should take a look at. Search and rescue, you've got one.
We've got the search and rescue category. You can have the other categories.
We got dibs on that one.
Okay, you can have that one. So you got to vote for, if you're going to vote for this one, though, you're going to have to vote for a Canadian one in one of the other categories.
There we go to the Veterans and Civil Service Outreach Award, and there is the Honor House Society.
And we may not be Canadians, but there's also a Vermont one for Adaptive Ski and Sport, which is a very cool organization.
They're out of Killington, Vermont. And as Morgan said, that's the Outdoor Accessibility and Education Award. Go into that category and vote for the Vermont Adaptive Ski and Sports. In the other categories, vote for who you like, but those are the ones we're strongly suggesting.
Right.
Based on
and it's Chicago. Vote early, vote often.
Exactly. That's it. Every day you can vote. You have a couple days left, and you can use multiple email addresses. We post a new podcast at the end of every month. Our website is centersteer.com and has all the shows you can listen to, the past shows and the new shows and the current shows, and also has show notes with links to stories we discussed in today's podcast, including a link to the Defender Service Awards. Go out there right now. You can pause the podcast, go vote, come back.
We'll wait. Go ahead.
And you can directly support the podcast at patreon.com/centersteer. You can buy a t-shirt, sticker, or even buy us a tea/brown water. The menu on our website has all the links to those supporting mechanisms. And if you have an idea for a guest, send us the details and a contact information if you have it. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover.
On behalf of the entire North American crew here at the Center Steer podcast, I'd like to thank you for listening today. We know you have a choice when it comes to your podcast content, and we do appreciate your choosing us. Please take a moment to look around you for any personal items you may be leaving behind, especially in the overhead bins. Remember that some items may have shifted during the show. Please watch your step on the way out, and you may now resume your important things.
Now, can we just have somebody do a remake of The Fast and the Furious with them only stealing old Land Rovers?
The Slow and the Impertinent.